Chapter 599. Meanwhile, the young man's expression was unsightly to the extreme. He knew that he'd been tricked the moment Yi Xian attacked. The sword in Yi Xian's hand was at least at the Dao realm, and it was definitely not something that a fleshly body could endure. The old man sighed lightly. He hadn't expected that there would be such a vicious swordsman in the world. At this moment, the young man and the old man suddenly looked to the right. Not far away, there was a young girl riding a white horse. Starlight sparkled beneath the white horse's feet. A galactic colt. A Dao realm demon beast. The young woman wore a floral dress, her hair was tied into a ponytail, and she had bangs on both sides of her forehead. There was a saber on the left side of her waist and a wine gourd on the right. The young man's expression suddenly became solemn when he saw the young woman. The young woman picked up the wine gourd on her waist and took 2 sips, and then she gave the young man a thumbs up before quickly turning around. The young man's expression was quite unsightly, but he didn't dare to respond. Meanwhile, the young woman suddenly patted the galactic colt she rode lightly. A moment later, the galactic colt vanished into the distance, and an expanse of specks of starlight appeared behind it like a river of stars. Yi Xian and Mo Xie were dashing madly towards the end of the horizon. They were heading back to the Great Wall. The reason Yi Xian did not follow up with another attack was that he had no way to do so. After all, that was the territory of the Kingdom of God. Moreover, he'd sensed a powerful aura approaching him. He didn't hesitate at all. Run. A wise man doesn't fight when the odds are against him. Meanwhile, Yu's voice suddenly resounded in Yi Xian's mind. You have to make a trip to that Kingdom of God. Yi Xian was struck dumb. Then he said, Why? Yu spoke solemnly. I sense the Dao laws on the 6th floor. Yi Xian asked, In the Kingdom of God? Yu replied, Isn't that obvious? Go to the Kingdom of God? Yi Xian was slightly hesitant. That place was definitely a forbidden place. Even though he was confident in his concealment technique, it was the Kingdom of God. Who knew what kind of experts there were over there? Meanwhile, Yu suddenly said, You have to make a trip there. You forcefully utilized that damned pagoda in the Order Alliance earlier, and it affected the pagoda greatly. If I hadn't suppressed it, then you would be finished by now. Prison pagoda. Only now did Yi Xian remember that this broken pagoda hadn't come out recently. Yu continued, The 4th floor's Dao law is extremely helpful to you right now. If you can obtain it, it can make up for the flaws in your body. Yi Xian asked, What kind of Dao law is the 6th floor? Yu said, You'll know when the time comes. Yi Xian was speechless. Yu continued, Make a trip there as soon as possible. It's best if these Dao laws don't fall into the hands of outsiders. Moreover, with these Dao laws, not only will your own strength be greatly increased, you will also be able to better control this broken tower. Yi Xian nodded. Understood. Divine Kingdom. Since there were Dao laws there, then he had to enter even if it was a dragon's lair or a tiger's lair. Yu continued, Besides that, you have to improve your cultivation as well. Your current cultivation is too low. If you're able to improve it to the Dao realm, then you'll notice that you'll be able to improve the might of these Dao laws to an extremely terrifying degree. Increase my cultivation. Yi Xian nodded slightly. Actually, the sword sect had creation rank swords, but he wasn't willing to devour them. Because the sword sect was too poor right now. The reason it was naturally because the sword sect and Wu Yuan had utilized those grand formations. They only had that little bit of resources left. If he were to devour them, then the disciples of the sword sect wouldn't even have a single good sword in the future. So, he had to think of another way to obtain the swords. A moment later, Yi Xian and Mo Xie arrived at the gates of the Great Wall of 10,000 Mountains. At this moment, Yi Xian and Mo Xie suddenly stopped. The next moment, both of them turned around abruptly. At this moment, a flash of saber light appeared in front of them without any warning. Yi Xian unsheathed his sword and slashed. Mo Xie smashed his fist forward. Bang! The saber light shattered, but Mo Xie and Yi Xian retreated rapidly at the same time. With this retreat, the two of them retreated directly to the front of the city gate, at least 2,000 feet away. After the two of them stopped, their expressions became extremely solemn. Yi Xian looked towards the distance and saw a young woman on a horse about 600 m away. The young woman was around 17 or 18 years old, and she looked very cool. A genius from the Divine Kingdom. At this moment, Many people had gathered on the city walls, and they were all geniuses from the various desolate worlds. Below the city walls, the young woman pointed at Yi Xian and Mo Xia, and then she gestured for them to attack together. How arrogant! How could they endure this? Mo Xia was about to attack when Yi Xian suddenly said, "Allow me." Mo Xia looked at Yi Xian and nodded slightly. Yi Xian walked over to the young woman and looked at her. "Super genius from the divine kingdom, do you dare to receive a strike from me?" Hearing this, Mo Xia almost fainted. The young woman looked at Yi Xian and then pointed at her own head. "Come," Yi Xian said, "then I won't be polite." As he finished speaking, he was already in front of the young woman. However, before he could draw his sword, the young woman suddenly unsheathed her saber and slashed. Instant! The moment the blade fell, Yi Xian's expression changed drastically. He hurriedly dodged to the back, but it was still a little too late. A huge wound was directly torn open on his chest. Blood gushed out. Yi Xian's expression was solemn. In that instant, if he had been a little slower, he would have been dismembered. What a fast saber! Yi Xian looked at the young woman and said angrily, "Didn't you agree to receive a strike from me while standing? Where's the trust between people?" The young woman raised her hand and slashed. This time, Yi Xian was prepared. The moment the young woman swung her saber, he rushed forward and slashed down, executing Heaven's sword. As soon as the sword slashed down, the saber light in front of Yi Xian was directly torn apart. At the same time, a saber light suddenly appeared in front of Yi Xian. Yi Xian's sword slashed upwards. Clang! A clear sound of something breaking suddenly resounded. At this moment, the young woman had returned to her horse, and the saber in her hand had been broken into two. On the city wall, everyone looked at the sword in Yi Xian's hand. What a sharp sword! A divine weapon! Everyone talks about how strong Yi Xian is. In my opinion, it's all because of this sword. Without this sword, his strength would definitely be greatly reduced. Below the city wall, the young woman looked at the sword in Yi Xian's hand. "Swordsman, do you dare not use this sword? Let's have a fair fight?" Yi Xian thought about it and said, "Sure, but let's make a bet." The young woman looked at Yi Xian. "What bet?" Yi Xian said, "If I don't use this sword, and you can't kill me in 3 moves, you have to give me the horse you're riding on." Star River Colt. The young woman looked at Yi Xian. "If you can beat me without this sword, I'll give it to you. But if you can't beat me, you have to give me your sword." Yi Xian's mouth twitched. This woman actually wanted his sword. Yi Xian said, "Your Excellency, you and I are the world's most dazzling geniuses. If we're only this big, I'm afraid we'll fight for months. How about this, each of us will make a move, and neither of us can dodge. We can only take it head-on, and whoever retreats the furthest will lose. How about that?" The young woman looked at Yi Xian. "Sure." Yi Xian nodded. "You're the girl, you go first." The young woman gazed at Yi Xian and said, "Can I use a saber?" As soon as she finished speaking, she waved the broken saber in her hand. Yi Xian hesitated for a moment before he said, "Can you use your hands?" The young woman gazed at Yi Xian. "Even if you're shameless, there's still a limit." "Thank you." Yi Xian was speechless. The young woman said, "I can use this saber, and you can use another sword. Only then will we be able to bring forth our true strengths, all right?" Yi Xian thought for a moment, and then he nodded. "All right. Go ahead." The young woman leaped off the Star River Colt, and then she walked slowly towards Yi Xian. She silently condensed a strand of energy, and at the same time, a strand of powerful saber energy enveloped down upon Yi Xian. The Saber Saint. The expressions of everyone here changed drastically when they witnessed this scene. A Saber Saint who isn't even 17 years old? Even Yi Xian was quite shocked. A Saber Saint who isn't even 17 years old? Such natural talent is extraordinary. The young woman gazed at Yi Xian, and then she sped up in the next moment. At the same time, a voice suddenly resounded. Instant! A single slash. As soon as the voice resounded, a crescent-shaped ray of light suddenly slashed down towards Yi Xian. This attack was too swift, and many people here hadn't even been able to react to it before Yi Xian had retreated to the city gates, and he'd moved over 1 kilometer back. On the other hand, a creation realm sword in Yi Xian's hand had suddenly shattered into countless pieces. Moreover, There was a deep gash on Yi Xian's arm, and his bones were visible. Yi Xian had an extremely solemn expression on his face. This woman's saber was truly too swift. It was swift to the point that others couldn't react to it. He'd merely instinctively defended himself earlier, and he'd already been reduced to such a state when he recovered from his shock. At this moment, he understood once more that there was always someone stronger in the world. The young woman glanced at Yi Xian and said, "It's your turn." Yi Xian said, "For the sake of fairness, I need to recuperate." The young woman gazed at Yi Xian and said, "All right." Yi Xian sat cross-legged on the ground and started devouring divine crystals. The young woman wasn't in a hurry. The girl was not in a hurry. She stood at the side and gently stroked the Star River colt beside her. The latter was very docile. An hour later, Yi Xian stood up, gazed at the young woman, and then waved the execution heaven sword in his hand. "I can't use this sword, right?" The young woman's face remained emotionless. "Yes, you can use any other sword." Yi Xian nodded and said, "Xiao bring me my sword." As soon as he finished speaking, a young woman appeared in front of Yi Xian. It was Xiao, and in her arms was a sword. When she saw the sword, the young woman's face instantly turned cold. This sword was obviously stronger than the previous one. Moreover, with the appearance of this sword, the Star River colt by her side immediately became uneasy. "Danger!" The young woman glared at Yi Xian. Yi Xian said seriously, "I can use this sword, can I?" The young woman shook her head. "So, a person can be shameless to this extent. You've refreshed my understanding of the word, shameless." "Yi Xian," the young woman said, "if you want to use it, then use it. People of God Nation aren't sore losers." Yi Xian smiled and then asked Xiao to keep the sword. He looked at the young woman and said, "Genius from God Nation, watch carefully, I won't use a sword." "Won't use a sword." The crowd was in an uproar. "This Yi Xian won't use a sword?" The young woman looked at Yi Xian and said, "Is that so? Then let me see." As she spoke, she secretly put up her guard. Yi Xian nodded, and in the next moment, a small empty character suddenly appeared between his brows. Space Dao Law. The moment the Space Dao Law appeared, the space around the young woman turned illusory. In the next moment, before the young woman could react, she had already appeared thousands of feet away. Everyone in the surroundings was stunned. The young woman was also dumbfounded. Space had changed position. Yi Xian looked at the young woman not far away and said, "You've lost." "Lost." The young woman clenched her left hand, and her expression was gloomy. She couldn't accept it. She naturally couldn't accept it. How could she accept losing in such a way? Yi Xian smiled and said, "What, genius from God Nation, are you sore losers? If you can't accept it, that's fine too. Take your horse and leave. I won't force you." The young woman gazed at Yi Xian and said, "Remember what you said." As soon as she finished speaking, she leaped onto her horse, and then she turned around and vanished into the distance. Yi Xian was stunned. What the hell? What the hell? She really left? Where's the pride of God Nation? Yi Xian was stunned. This woman doesn't play by the rules. Right at this moment, a cold laugh suddenly resounded from the city wall. So that's the genius sword saint of legend. Does he only know how to rely on external objects? Yi Xian turned around to look at the man on the city wall. At this moment, the man was looking at him as well. The Dao Validation Realm. The man didn't look old and was around the age of 23 or 24. Since he was able to attain the Dao Validation Realm at such an age, then he was definitely not an ordinary person. Yi Xian didn't get angry, and he said with a smile, "External objects are a form of strength as well, right?" The man laughed coldly. "Then don't you think it's embarrassing? Even if you don't think it's embarrassing to rely on such opportunistic tricks when facing an expert of the God Nation, we all do." Yi Xian asked, "Then why didn't you come down and fight her one-on-one just now?" The man sneered. "I wanted to see your performance." Yi Xian suddenly disappeared from the spot. The man's pupils constricted. The next moment, he suddenly punched forward. Chi! As Yi Xian's sword arrived, an arm directly flew out. It was the man's arm. At the same time, the man directly retreated dozens of meters. Not far away, Yi Xian glanced at the man. "Since you want to see my performance, then shut up." The man was about to speak when Yi Xian suddenly looked straight at him. "I dare you to say one more word," the man said fiercely. "Yi Xian, if you have the ability, don't take that sword." You. Right at this moment, a flying sword suddenly flashed across the field. Before the man could react, his head directly flew out. Everyone present was dumbfounded. He really killed him? Not far away, the man's blood suddenly transformed into a ray of bloodlight that was absorbed by Yi Xian, and Yi Xian's entire body started to tremble. Meanwhile, a voice suddenly sounded out from the side. "Who allowed you to kill people here?" Yi Xian turned around and grinned. "Sorry. I still want to kill." As soon as he finished speaking, a ray of red light suddenly spread out from his body, and the blood all over his body actually started to boil. Within the World Prison Pagoda, a Yu's voice suddenly sounded out. "His bloodline is acting up. This fellow can't suppress his bloodline." Chapter 600. Bloodline. After Yi Xian killed the first person, the blood in his body began to slowly boil. After his blood boiled, a thought suddenly appeared in his mind. Kill. He really wanted to kill. At this moment, even his sword intent couldn't suppress this thought. A middle-aged man stood in front of Yi Xian. When the middle-aged man heard Yi Xian's words, his eyes instantly turned cold. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly said, "Leave quickly, I don't want to kill." "Oh no, I want to kill, I..." Suddenly, Yi Xian raised his head to look at the middle-aged man, and in the next moment, he suddenly slashed forward. The middle-aged man's expression changed, and he stabbed the spear in his hand forward. Hiss! As soon as the spear came into contact with Yi Xian's executing heaven's sword, it was directly split into two. Seeing this scene, the middle-aged man's expression changed drastically, and he hurriedly retreated. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly rushed towards a man beside him. The man's expression changed drastically, and he turned around and ran. Just like that, Yi Xian madly slashed people in the battlefield, and he slashed anyone he saw. Yi Xian has gone mad. All of a sudden, the Great Wall descended into chaos. No one stopped Yi Xian. At this moment, Yi Xian's mind was clearly not normal. Not only that, but he was also holding that heaven-defying sword in his hand, and no one could stop that sword of his. At this moment, an old man suddenly appeared in front of Yi Xian. This person was Spiritual Master Chu. Yi Xian didn't care at all, and he raised his hand and slashed down. Spiritual Master Chu frowned slightly. His figure flashed, and he directly dodged Yi Xian's sword, and then he pointed a finger at the center of Yi Xian's brows. Yi Xian's body trembled, and in the next moment, the bloodline in his body was suppressed by a mysterious force. But soon, the blood in Yi Xian's body began to boil violently like boiling water. Bang! A red light suddenly rushed out from the top of Yi Xian's head, and the powerful force directly shook Taoist Master Chu to the point of retreating several steps. Seeing this scene, perfected Master Chu's expression changed slightly. He looked to the side. Together. As soon as he finished speaking, Tang Yan appeared in front of Yi Xian. Very quickly, both of them pointed at the space between Yi Xian's eyebrows at the same time, and the powerful force was instantly pushed back into Yi Xian's body. However, his blood was still boiling and showed no signs of stopping. Sage Chu said in a deep voice, "Yi Xian, you have to cooperate with the two of us." Yi Xian nodded. Soon, with Yi Xian's cooperation, the blood in his body gradually calmed down. Sensing this scene, Taoist Master Chu and Tang Yan's expressions relaxed. At this time, Yi Xian had returned to normal. After returning to normal, Yi Xian's expression was incomparably grave. He discovered that there was something wrong with his bloodline. At this moment, Perfected Chu said, "What bloodline is this?" "What bloodline?" Yi Xian smiled bitterly. "I don't know either." Perfected Chu said in a deep voice, "Your bloodline is extremely abnormal. Now that it has awakened, it can be activated at any time because of your emotions. However, you can't suppress it now, so you have to control your emotions, understand?" Yi Xian nodded slightly. "All right. Emotions." He also discovered that his bloodline was related to his emotions. Just now, when he had killing intent, this bloodline automatically activated. He couldn't control it at all. He had to be careful. Yi Xian's expression gradually became serious. Although this bloodline could obtain great power after being activated, He couldn't suppress this bloodline at all. He didn't want to be controlled by this bloodline. At this moment Perfected Chu said, "Come with us. We have something to discuss with you." With that, he turned around and left. Yi Xian shrugged his shoulders, then looked at Xie, who was a little worried, and said with a smile, "It's fine." Xie nodded. It had to be said that Yi Xian's appearance just now was quite terrifying. Yi Xian followed Perfected Chu and Tang Yan into the Heaven Trampling Hall. At this moment, there were 4 people in the Heaven Trampling Hall. He knew 3 of them. They were the Star Lord, the Demon King, and the Southern Sect Martial Master. The other person was a middle-aged man. This person was the current deputy commander of the Divine Dao Army, Xueqi. As for the Divine Dao Lord, there were a total of 3 deputy commanders. Xueqi glanced at Yi Xian with a trace of curiosity in his eyes. This was because the attitude of Perfected Chu and the others towards Yi Xian was as if they were treating an expert of the same level. As for Yi Xian, he was clearly only at the 10,000 Dharma realm. Of course, the identity of a sword saint could not be ignored. However, a mere sword saint should not be in their eyes. Xueqi did not ask further and immediately said, "Seniors, the commander is in seclusion and cannot come out for the time being. Please forgive him." Perfected Chu said, "It's fine. Let's get down to business." Xueqi nodded slightly. According to the information we received, the Divine Master of the Divine Kingdom is gathering the army and various experts of the kingdom. As for how many there are, we don't know. We only know that it will definitely not be a small number. Moreover, the martial art civilization in the Divine Kingdom is developed. The strength of these experts might exceed our imagination. Yi Xian suddenly said, "We know too little about the Divine Kingdom." Everyone looked at Yi Xian, and Yi Xian said softly, "We know too little about them. This is definitely a very disadvantageous thing for us. The 2 armies have not fought yet, so we know nothing about them. However, they know our strength. Under these circumstances, we have already lost by quite a bit." At this point, he glanced at everyone and said, "I suggest that we first figure out the overall strength of the Divine Kingdom." Xueqi shook his head. "We can't figure it out. Our people can't enter the Divine Kingdom at all." At the side, the Astral Master suddenly said, "Your people can't enter, but City Lord Yi should be able to, right?" Yi Xian smiled. "Why, the battle hasn't started yet. Astral Master is already having an internal strife?" The Astral Master said indifferently, "It's not against you. It's just that Yi Xian's concealment technique is unparalleled in the world. I think entering the Divine Kingdom should be a very simple matter for you, isn't it?" Yi Xian looked straight at the Astral Master. The Astral Master's strength is so strong. It shouldn't be difficult to find out some information. The Astral Master smiled. "City Lord Yi might not know. The moment I leave here, the people of the Divine Kingdom will immediately know." Yi Xian smiled. "Then has the Astral Master ever thought that if I go to the Divine Kingdom, what if I'm discovered?" The Astral Master was expressionless. "Everything has its risks. Since City Lord Yi has this ability, what's a little risk?" Yi Xian's smile became wider. "Then why doesn't the Astral Master bear this risk yourself?" The Astral Master looked at Yi Xian and didn't speak. At this moment, the Demon King suddenly said, "We really need someone to enter the Divine Kingdom to help us find out information." As he said, he glanced at Yi Xian. Tang Yan said, "Although City Lord Ye's concealment technique is unparalleled in the world, this divine race isn't an ordinary country. If he enters the city and is discovered..." At this point, he shook his head slightly and didn't continue. At this moment the Astral Master suddenly said, "That's true. If City Lord Yi is discovered after entering the Divine Kingdom, and the Divine Kingdom sees his extraordinary potential, they might recruit him. At that time, it won't be a good thing for us." Hearing this, Spiritual Master Chu and the others' faces instantly darkened. Needless to say, they were really afraid of that. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly shook his head and smiled. "Sad, too sad." Everyone looked at Yi Xian, and Yi Xian looked at the Astral Master. "Astral Master, forgive me for being straightforward. Other than internal strife, your Order alliance is really trash." "Presumptuous." Not far away, Xueqi suddenly stood up and looked coldly at Yi Xian. "City Lord Yi, this isn't your divine martial city. Watch your words." He was also from the Order Alliance. Yi Xian smiled. Watch my words. Who the F***ck do you think you are? As his voice fell, the Executing Heaven sword suddenly appeared in his palm. Yi Xian held the Executing Heaven sword and pointed it at Xueqi. Aren't you guys sad? The corpse of your Order Alliance's ancestor is still hanging in the god burial plain. But instead of thinking about how to retrieve his corpse, you guys are here every day thinking about how to kill me. At this point, he pointed his sword at the Astral Master. Especially you, Astral Master. Isn't your Order Alliance very arrogant? Go and be arrogant to the Divine Kingdom. Why are you targeting me? I didn't torture the corpse of your Order Alliance's ancestor. The Astral Master stared at Yi Xian. His eyes were filled with killing intent. Yi Xian was not afraid. His body gradually glowed with a blood-red light. His expression was ferocious. I don't understand. Your ancestor's corpse is hanging in the god burial plain. How can you guys tolerate it? If it were me, I would have F***king gone to the Divine Kingdom. At the side, the Southern Sect Martial Master suddenly said, City Lord Yi, the Divine Kingdom isn't that simple. Your thinking is too extreme. Calm down first. Yi Xian said angrily, Calm down what? This Astral Master is obviously trying to kill me. Why should I calm down? The Southern Sect Martial Master shook his head helplessly. City Lord Yi, we didn't say that you must go to the Divine Kingdom to risk your life. Can you not be so agitated? Yi Xian said coldly, The 5 of you are a group. You only know how to bully me. The Southern Sect Martial Master was speechless. At this time Spiritual Master Chu said, Little friend Yi, calm down first. Yi Xian nodded. All right, I'll calm down. As soon as he finished speaking, he sat back down. However, he still didn't put away his sword. Spiritual Master Chu hesitated for a moment and said, City Lord Yi, the 6 of us are the focus of the Divine Kingdom. Our every move will definitely alarm them. Thus, the 6 of us are unable to head to the Divine Kingdom. But you're different. The Divine Kingdom won't pay too much attention to you. You're strong so, Yi Xian suddenly said, I'm afraid of death. Everyone was speechless. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly said, Even though I'm afraid of death, I'm still willing to go to the Divine Kingdom. Everyone looked at Yi Xian with slight surprise. Yi Xian said in a low voice, I know. We should unite now. Everyone needs me now, so I'm duty-bound. However, I have a few conditions. If everyone agrees to them, I'll head to the Divine Kingdom. Spiritual Master Chu nodded slightly. Speak. Yi Xian said, First, I need at least 20 Creation Realm swords. Of course, Dao Realm swords are fine too. Secondly, I need a defensive treasure that is at least at the Dao Realm. Third, I'm poor. I need some God crystals. A few million will do. Finally, I need everyone to guarantee my safety. As for how to guarantee it, I'll leave it to the seniors to think of a way. Speaking up to here, he looked at Spiritual Master Chu and the others. I'm risking my life for everyone. My requests aren't too much, right? Everyone was speechless. P.S. Thank you for your recent donations and monthly votes. I've been under a lot of pressure because I'm afraid that I won't write well and I'll lose you. Up until now, I've met many reader friends. Among these friends, some of them will disappear as they walk. And I don't dare to disturb them. I'm afraid that they'll say, your new book is as ugly as T. That would be 100-fold blow to my young heart. Most of the time, readers only recognize the book and not the author. If it's good, I'll read it. If it's good, I'll vote. Not good? Sorry, I don't have *king care who you are. I used to be like this too. I can only work hard to write so that you like my book, like me as a person. Oh no, as long as you like my book. Chapter 601. All of a sudden, the hall fell silent. Yi Xian's request, apart from the Dao Realm treasure, was actually not too much. However, everyone was still a little uncomfortable. Because what Yi Xian was doing was kind of extortion. At this moment, Yi Xian said, If you feel that it's difficult, it's fine. You can just send someone else. After all, going to God Nation is equivalent to risking your life. Seniors, I am also very afraid of death. At this moment the Demon King suddenly said, "City Lord Yi, God Nation is invading. Everyone should unite." "Your method." Yi Xian looked at the Demon King. "I heard that the demon race also has a super genius, and he is on the law rank. I think he is not weak. Why don't we send him? If he is willing to go, I am willing to personally donate 2 Creation Realm swords." Hearing this, the Demon King's face suddenly darkened. "He is not good at concealment." Yi Xian smiled. "Excuses. All excuses. You are just afraid that something bad will happen to him. What? The life of your demon race genius is a life, but my life is not a life." The Demon King looked at Yi Xian and did not speak. Yi Xian was not afraid. Anyway, this Demon King had targeted him several times. There was no need for him to give him face. At this moment, Spiritual Master Chu softly sighed. "Little friend Yi, other things are fine. As for the Dao Realm treasure." "This," Yi Xian suddenly said, "doesn't the Order Alliance have a Dao Realm treasure?" "Oh right, it is called the Heavenly God Armor. I think it is very good." Not far away, the Star Lord glanced at Yi Xian. "What are you dreaming about in broad daylight?" Tang Yan and the others also shook their heads. This Heavenly God Armor was a treasure on the Interstellar Bounty Board, and it was ranked 6th. Although it was not as good as Yi Xian's treasure, it was still a treasure. Yi Xian was really thinking too much about this treasure. Yi Xian suddenly said, "Star Lord, how about I make a deal with you?" Planet Lord looked at Yi Xian. Not doing it. He was very wary of Yi Xian at the moment. Yi Xian's shamelessness was unprecedented and would never be matched in the future. Yi Xian suddenly said, "How about I go get the body of your lawful alliance's Gu Tatian?" Hearing this, the Star Lord squinted his eyes. Yi Xian smiled and said, "Are you doing it or not? If you do, then give me the treasure." The Star Lord said indifferently, "You don't have that ability." Yi Xian said, "You don't have to worry about that. Just tell me if you're willing or not." After a moment of silence, the Star Lord said, "Bring it back and I'll give you the treasure." Yi Xian laughed and said, "Do you think I'm stupid? What if you don't acknowledge it after I get it back?" As he spoke, he gazed at Taoist Chu. "Senior Chu, I can give up on the Dao Realm treasure, but I do want those 20 Creation Realm swords. If you can satisfy this small request of mine, then I'll investigate the strength of the Divine Kingdom even if I have to risk my life. But if you have any difficulties, then just pretend that I never said anything." The surroundings fell silent. Everyone finally understood what was going on. It wasn't impossible for Yi Xian to risk his life, but he had to give them benefits. Meanwhile, the Southern Sect Martial Master suddenly said, "Then get him 20 swords. After all, the journey to the Divine Kingdom is extremely dangerous, and it can't be without benefits." Yi Xian glanced at the Southern Sect Martial Master. Amongst the 5 of them, only the Southern Sect Martial Master would occasionally speak up for him. As for Taoist Chu, he couldn't see through him. Taoist Chu nodded slightly. "Then I'll get you 20 swords." As soon as he finished speaking, he waved his right hand, and 4 swords suddenly appeared in front of Yi Xian. The 4 swords were all at the Creation Realm, and every single one of them emitted the aura of an old sword Dao. They weren't ordinary Creation Realm swords. At this moment, the Southern Sect Martial Master suddenly said, "I've collected some over the years. I'll give them to you." As soon as he finished speaking, he waved his right hand, and 4 swords appeared in front of Yi Xian. They were all at the Creation Realm as well. Soon, the Demon King also took out 4 swords. Only the Star Lord was left. Yi Xian looked at the Star Lord, and the latter didn't hesitate. He directly pointed with his finger, and 4 swords floated in front of Yi Xian. 20 swords. Yi Xian sighed in his heart. These old monsters were extraordinarily rich. At this moment, Taoist Chu pointed with his finger, and a fist-sized stone fell in front of Yi Xian. This is a space teleportation stone. If you encounter any danger, you can crush this stone, and it will teleport you here in an instant. Yi Xian nodded, and then put away the 20-sword domain teleportation stones. Following that, he cupped his fists at everyone. "Seniors, I'm going into seclusion for 3 days. After 3 days, I'll head to the Kingdom of God. However, I'll go there quietly, and I hope that you can keep this a secret." Taoist Chu nodded. "Of course." Yi Xian didn't say anything else, and turned to leave. After Yi Xian left, the nearby Star-Lord suddenly said. This person is a bandit, and his greed is insatiable. Are you really going to indulge him like this? Taoist Chu looked at the Star-Lord. Then why don't we let the geniuses of the Order Alliance go? The Star-Lord frowned slightly, and didn't speak. Taoist Chu shook his head. Star-Lord, I know about the grudge between the Order Alliance and him, but you have to understand the situation now. Yi Xian is on the same boat as us. If he stands on our side, it'll be beneficial for us. The Southern Sect's Martial Master nodded. Brother Chu's words make sense. This Yi Xian's combat strength isn't bad, and he's an expert in assassination. You have to know that if we go to war with the Kingdom of God, if the younger generation doesn't have a few to shoulder the burden, our people will definitely be massacred by the Kingdom of God's geniuses. At that time, it'll be very disadvantageous for us. And with Yi Xian around, the pressure on our younger generation will be much less. The Star-Lord was silent. Tang Yen also said, It's indeed dangerous for him to go to the Kingdom of God. It's understandable that he wants such a little benefit. Our top priority now is to fight against the God race. As for the grudge between him and the Order Alliance, once this matter is over, you can do whatever you want. At this time, Spiritual Master Chu looked at Xueqi, who was not far away. Pass down my order to your God Dao soldier. Don't provoke this person. This person has a bad temper. If you find him, he'll stab a hole in you regardless of the consequences. Xueqi said indifferently. My God Dao soldier has a bad temper too. Spiritual Master Chu looked straight at Xueqi. Commander Chu, you have to understand one thing. He once killed more than 30 Dao realm powerhouses. Also, there's a problem with his bloodline. After he kills someone, he can't control himself. You better tell your people not to provoke him. Otherwise, the old man won't want to come out and clean up your mess. After saying that, he turned and left. At the side, the Southern Sect's Martial Master also looked at Xueqi. Don't provoke this hot-tempered little guy. When he goes crazy, it's really a headache. After saying that, he also left. The Demon King looked at Xueqi. I hope that you, the God Dao Lord, can suppress his arrogance. After saying that, he got up and disappeared. Soon, only the Star-Lord and Xueqi were left in the hall. Xueqi looked at the Star-Lord. The Star-Lord shook his head. Don't provoke this person for now. Xueqi said in a deep voice. Is this person really that monstrous? The Star-Lord said softly. The scary thing about him isn't his strength, but that he doesn't care about his life. If he wants to fight, he will fight. He won't consider the consequences and will fight with his life. He's just a fool. Don't provoke him for now. After saying that, he turned and disappeared. Xueqi. After Yi Xian left the heaven-trampling hall, he found a quiet place. Then, he took out a creation realm sword and stabbed it into his abdomen. Devour. Very quickly, streams of pure energy spread out from his body. Chapter 602. Devour. Yi Xian sat cross-legged in the prison pagoda. As he devoured the manifestation realm sword, his body began to tremble. Not far away from Yi Xian was a Yu. A Yu sized up Yi Xian with curiosity in her eyes. This was the first time she had seen this cultivation method of devouring swords. About 2 hours later, Yi Xian picked up another sword and stabbed it into his abdomen. Boom! A powerful aura suddenly spread out from his body. Yu ignored Yi Xian and walked to the side to look at the Emperor Hound. The Emperor Hound was also cultivating. Ever since the Emperor Hound obtained the little white fellow's gift, it had been in seclusion. Its aura was gradually growing stronger every day. Yu sized up the Emperor Hound and said softly, This fellow will probably recover to its peak soon. No, that little fellow's purple aura is changing this fellow's bloodline. Is it evolving? Evolving. Since ancient times, many demon beasts' achievements depended on their bloodline. To a large extent, bloodline determined the demon beast's achievements. It could be said that bloodline was very important to demon beasts. Of course, there were exceptions. It was evolution. It was absolutely impossible to break through one's bloodline and evolve to a higher level without great fortuitous encounters. But now, this Emperor Hound was showing signs of evolution. What kind of existence was that little white fellow? Yu frowned deeply. At this moment, she could not help but think, if that little fellow had given her a bit of purple aura, would she have evolved herself? Dao laws could naturally evolve as well. It was still a pity. Ayu shook her head. If she had been a little more thick-skinned back then, perhaps she would have mostly recovered by now. Ayu turned and left. She returned to the 5th floor. At this moment, Xiao Ling was watering a spirit tree. Ayu walked over to take a look. Xiao Ling turned and grinned at Ayu before continuing to water the tree. As she watched, Ayu's expression suddenly became solemn, because she realized that Xiao Ling had become somewhat different. Was he going to evolve? Ayu looked at Xiao Ling, not far away, and did not speak for a long time. After a long time, Ayu said softly, I have to be more thick-skinned in the future. 3 days later, Yi Xian, who was sitting cross-legged in the World Prison Pagoda, suddenly stood up. The moment he stood up, a powerful aura suddenly emanated from his body. The spell defensive state. In 3 days, he had devoured a total of 15 Creation Realm swords. After absorbing the Creation Realm, he finally broke through from the Dharma Realm to the Dharma Defensive Realm. In the field, Yi Xian closed his eyes slightly. He opened his palm. The Executing Heaven sword was floating quietly in his palm. The spell defensive state. After a while, Yi Xian shook his head. He was only at the spell defensive realm, yet he had to devour 15 swords at the creation realm. What would he do in the future? Moreover, the further one went, the less useful a blessed realm sword would be. Where was he going to find so many Dao realm swords to devour? This was a bottomless pit. At this moment, Ayu suddenly appeared in front of Yi Xian. How do you feel? Yi Xian said, It feels different from before. Moreover, I noticed that my divine sense seems to have become much stronger. Ayu nodded. You've improved greatly in all aspects now. However, your current strength is still unable to resist the Dao laws of the 6th floor. Yi Xian asked. Then what should we do? Ayu spoke indifferently. Don't you have me? Yi Xian hurriedly said. Yes. With Miss Ayu here, it's naturally not a problem. Ayu said, I'm just afraid that it has fallen into someone else's hands. Yi Xian asked, What if it has fallen into someone else's hands? Ayu glanced at Yi Xian. If it's forcefully subdued, then we'll take it back. If it follows us willingly, then we'll trick it back. Aren't you very good at deceiving people? Yi Xian was speechless. Ayu said, Go quickly. I want to take a nap. Don't bother me if there's nothing important. Otherwise, I'll beat you up. She intended to leave once she finished speaking. Meanwhile, Yi Xian suddenly said, Miss Ayu, can I enter the 7th floor after I find the Dao laws of the 6th floor? The 7th floor. He hadn't forgotten that there was a box and an unparalleled martial technique on the 7th floor. An unparalleled martial technique. If he were to learn the boundless sword, then he would probably be able to kill a Star-Lord with a single strike of his sword with his current strength. Ayu fell silent for a short moment before she said, If I join forces with the Dao laws of the 6th floor, then I'll be able to allow you to enter the 7th floor. Of course, you'll be in danger because we don't have the Dao laws of the 7th floor right now. So, it'll be a problem if you try to force your way through. Yi Xian laughed bitterly. Miss Ayu, why can't the pagoda itself enter the 7th floor? Ayu spoke indifferently, because it hasn't fully awakened yet. You should feel fortunate about that. She turned around and left once she finished speaking. A short while later, Yi Xian left the pagoda and snuck towards the Divine Kingdom. He had to search for the Dao laws. He needed to find as many Dao laws as he could. Firstly, it was for the sake of the pagoda's stability, and secondly, it was to improve his strength. Only by being strong could he protect himself. He didn't want his fate to be in the hands of another. Not long after Yi Xian left the Great Wall, the Star-Lord suddenly appeared in front of Yi Xian. Yi Xian's brows knit together slightly. Is there something you need? The Star-Lord gazed at Yi Xian. Can you really bring back Star-Lord Ancient's corpse? Yi Xian spoke indifferently. It's up to you whether you believe me or not. The Star-Lord flicked his finger, and a spatial ring descended in front of Yi Xian. Yi Xian glanced at it, and there was only a single piece of armor within it. A Dao Realm Divine Armor. The Star-Lord looked Yi Xian in the eyes. If you try to play any tricks, then you'll definitely regret it. I guarantee that. He turned around and left once he finished speaking. Yi Xian put the spatial ring away, and then placed the divine armor within the pagoda. You. Is there anything wrong with this thing? On the 5th floor, Yu sized up the divine armor in front of her. What do you want this piece of trash for? Yi Xian. At this moment, the divine armor in front of Yu suddenly trembled, and the next moment, a black light blasted directly at Yu. Yu raised her hand and slapped it. Boom! The black light was directly shattered, and then Yu grabbed the divine armor and gave it a vicious beating. Yi Xian shook his head. Was this divine armor stupid? It actually provoked Yu. Wasn't it looking for a beating? After a long time, the divine armor became obedient. Yu said, "There's nothing wrong with this lousy thing, it just needs a beating." With that said, she threw the divine armor out. The God of Heaven armor was directly tossed to the 1st floor. After arriving at the 1st floor, the God of Heaven armor noticed the spirit trees that little Ling had planted. In the next moment, it flew directly before a spirit tree, and then it transformed into a ray of black light that enveloped the spirit tree. In an instant, the spirit tree and spirit fruit were completely devoured by it. It didn't take long for it to want to devour a second spirit tree, but Xiao Ling suddenly appeared in front of it. Xiao Ling clenched her fists tightly, and her face was livid with rage. Her icy cold gaze sent chills down one's spine. It didn't take long for the divine armor to be chased all over the pagoda by Xiao Ling. It wasn't that it didn't resist, but when Xiao Ling took out the sword at the top of the pagoda, it completely gave up resisting. Outside the pagoda, Yi Xian shook his head. Needless to say, no one could save this divine armor now. Recollecting his thoughts, Yi Xian kept moving forward. His target was the kingdom of God. A while later, Yi Xian arrived in front of Gu Taishan's corpse. He stole a glance around and found nothing. Then, he flew in front of Gu Tatian and saw a pitch-black chain on Gu Taishan's body. The chain was pitch black, but there was a blood-red line in the middle. Yi Xian was about to attack when a voice suddenly rang out. "You can't break this chain." Yi Xian's heart skipped a beat. Who was talking? He scanned the surroundings and suddenly looked at Gu Tatian. You're still alive?" Gu Tatian suddenly looked up and Yi Xian realized that Gu Taishan's eyes had disappeared, leaving behind 2 pitch-black holes. Gu Tatian shook his head. "I died 1,000 years ago." Yi Xian calmed himself down. "Senior, are you a zombie?" Gu Tatian. Yi Xian looked at Gu Tatian warily. It was better to be on guard against others. A moment later, Gu Tatian shook his head. "It's just a wisp of my divine soul." Then he turned to Yi Xian. "Are you from the sword sect?" Yi Xian hesitated and was about to speak when Gu Tatian suddenly said, "You're a sword saint at such a young age and you're not bad." Yi Xian shook his head. "You flatter me, senior." Gu Tatian asked softly, "Is the God Nation going to make a comeback?" Yi Xian nodded. Gu Tatian fell silent for a moment, then asked, "Is there anyone in the Order Alliance who is titled as an emperor?" "Titled as an emperor?" Yi Xian frowned. "What do you mean? An expert above the Dao validation state?" Gu Tatian shook his head. Above the Dao validation state is the Dao mastery state, and above that is the Tendo state. Is there anyone in the Order Alliance who is titled as an emperor? Yi Xian thought for a moment and shook his head. "I don't think so." He guessed that the Star Lord and the others were at the Tendo state at most. Gu Tatian said in a deep voice, "We don't even have one emperor. How can we fight against the God Nation?" Yi Xian shook his head. "Senior, let me take you away." Gu Tatian said softly, "Young man, I have a presumptuous request. I wonder if you can fulfill it." Yi Xian hesitated for a moment and said, "Please tell me, senior." Gu Tatian nodded. "I've been trapped here for 1,000 years. My body has been hung here, exposed to the sun, the rain, and the wind. I don't want to disappear from this world. Moreover, the God Nation is making a comeback. Who can stop them without me? So, my young friend, you must help me." Yi Xian lowered his head. "Senior, I don't know how to resurrect." Gu Tatian said, "Tendo, you don't need to resurrect. Just give me your body." A wisp of black light suddenly disappeared into Yi Xian's brow. Possession. Chapter 603. When Wu Taishan's soul entered Yi Xian's mind, he was going to destroy Yi Xian's soul completely and take over Yi Xian's body. In his opinion, although Yi Xian was a sword saint, his cultivation level was too low. There was no way that Yi Xian's soul could compete with his. However, when he entered Yi Xian's mind, an illusory Xiao Ta suddenly appeared in front of him. Wu Taishan's expression changed drastically when he saw the illusory Xiao Ta. You. Why do you have this tower? Possession. Yi Xian never thought that Wu Tatian would possess someone else's body. As a matter of fact, a true overlord would never possess someone else's body. Possessing someone else's body meant that one was useless. Moreover, Wu Taishan's soul was only a wisp. Even if the possession was successful, it would be useless. He would at most live a little longer. After all, a damaged soul could not be repaired. What Yi Xian didn't expect was that Wu Tatian didn't have the demeanor of a powerhouse at all. Inside Yi Xian's body, Wu Tatian was enveloped by the prison tower and could not move at all. Wu Tatian said in a deep voice, "Who are you? Why do you have this tower?" Yi Xian didn't waste any time. He opened his palm and the soul-suppressing sword appeared in his hand. The next second, the soul-suppressing sword sunk into Yi Xian's forehead. Inside the tower, the soul-suppressing sword floated above Wu Taishan's head and began to absorb his soul. Wu Tatian yelled, "How dare you!" He wanted to resist, but he was suppressed by the prison tower. There was no way he could resist. Wu Tatian was starting to panic. A moment later, Wu Tatian said in a deep voice, "Mister, if you let me go, I can give you a lot of benefits." Xiao Han suddenly said, "Young master, if I absorb his soul, I can read his memories." Yi Xian said, "Yes." Xiao Han was overjoyed. "Thank you, young master." The soul-suppressing sword began to vibrate violently. Soon, Gu Taishan's soul became more and more illusory. Gu Tatian said fiercely, "Do you want to fight to the death?" At this time, the soul-suppressing sword suddenly fell straight down. Boom! In an instant, Gu Taishan's soul was absorbed without any resistance. So, the soul-suppressing sword had a natural suppressive effect on souls, and with the help of the prison pagoda, how could Gu Tatian resist it? At this time, Soul suddenly said excitedly, "Young lord, this person's soul is very strong. I might be able to advance." Advancement? Yi Xian said right away, "Raise to Dao realm?" Little Soul said, "It's possible." Yi Xian smiled and said, "That's a good thing." Little Soul said, "I want to digest this person's soul, so I can't serve master during this period." Yi Xian smiled. "There's no hurry. Take your time to absorb it." Little Soul grunted and began to focus on absorbing Gu Taishan's soul. Yi Xian looked at Gu Taishan's corpse and shook his head. So even an expert of this level was afraid of death. But then again, the longer one lived, the more afraid one was of death. Without further ado, Yi Xian waved his right hand and put away Gu Taishan's corpse. Then he turned and ran. However, no one showed up. Yi Xian continued toward the divine nation. He didn't dare to use the sword kinesis flight or travel through space, so he only arrived at a castle after 6 hours. The castle was called the Tumu Castle. It was huge and looked like a crouching beast from a distance. The castle's gates were not closed and people often came and went. Yi Xian snuck into the castle. There weren't many people in the castle and most of them were soldiers. Moreover, these soldiers' auras were extremely strong, a sign that they were not weak. Yi Xian kept moving forward. Suddenly, a group of cavalrymen appeared at the end of the street in the distance. The cavalrymen galloped toward the gates, their leader shouting, "Close the gates!" "Close the gates?" Yi Xian frowned. He looked at the gates and saw that the gates had suddenly closed. Soon, a huge light screen enveloped the entire castle. Not only that, but a beam of light suddenly shot down from the sky and swept across the city. Yi Xian's face darkened when he saw this. "Is it looking for me?" The beam of light was about to hit him. Yi Xian didn't dare to let it hit him and immediately retreated. However, the beam of light was sweeping across the entire area, and there was nowhere for him to retreat to. Seeing that there was nowhere to retreat, Yi Xian stopped and let the beam of light hit him. At this moment, he had no choice but to believe in the chaotic energy. Soon, the beam of light swept past him and nothing happened. Yi Xian heaved a sigh of relief. However, the beam of light suddenly turned around and landed right where he was. Yi Xian's expression changed. Something's wrong. Suddenly, A dozen powerful auras surged toward him from all directions. Yi Xian didn't dare act carelessly, and he turned around and fled. At this moment, he didn't conceal himself any longer. He immediately utilized the spatial Dao laws and sword control technique. In practically an instant, he'd appeared outside the castle. However, the beam of light was still on him. Yi Xian was just about to flee again when a strand of saber energy tore through the sky. It was so swift that it instantly arrived in front of Yi Xian. Yi Xian didn't dare act carelessly and raised his sword. Hiss! The saber energy was instantly slashed into pieces. Meanwhile, a woman suddenly appeared in front of Yi Xian, and Yi Xian was stunned when he saw her. The woman was stunned as well. Yi Xian naturally knew her. It was that woman who'd chased him and Mo Xia all the way to the Great Wall. However, she wasn't riding a horse this time. The woman sized Yi Xian up and said, "Why have you come to my divine kingdom?" Yi Xian thought for a moment and said, "To play." The woman's brows knit together slightly. "Shameless swordsman. You're definitely here to obtain military intelligence." Yi Xian shook his head. "I'm not." The woman said, "You are. I'll chop you to death today." As soon as she finished speaking, her figure suddenly vanished like a ghost. Hiss! A dazzling strand of saber energy flashed. It was fast. That was Yi Xian's first thought. This woman's saber technique was even faster than his flying sword. However, he wasn't afraid at all. Yi Xian raised his hand and swung his sword. Clang! A clear and melodious sound of something breaking resounded, and then the woman returned to where she stood earlier while the saber in her hand had been split into two. She glanced at her saber, and then she gazed at Yi Xian. "Shameless swordsman, do you dare to put down that sword and fight me fairly?" Yi Xian thought for a moment and said, "How about this? I won't use my sword, and you don't use your saber as well. We'll use our hands, all right?" The woman thought for a moment and said, "All right." As soon as she finished speaking, she put her broken saber away. Yi Xian put his sword away as well. Meanwhile, the woman suddenly charged forward. Her speed was too swift, so everywhere she passed, numerous seemingly material afterimages were left behind. As soon as she vanished, Yi Xian vanished as well. It didn't take long for them to grow closer to each other. When they were just 1.5 m away from each other, a saber had suddenly appeared in the woman's hand. At practically the exact same moment, a sword had appeared in Yi Xian's hand. Both of them attacked at the same time. Bang! An explosion suddenly resounded, and then both of them instantly retreated by 300 m. The woman glanced at the saber in her hand. At this moment, it had shattered into pieces as well. She gazed at Yi Xian, put her saber away and said, "I'm serious this time." Yi Xian nodded. "All right." As soon as she finished speaking, the woman suddenly appeared in front of him. Her speed was so fast that Yi Xian's expression changed drastically. In the next moment, countless blade auras directly drowned Yi Xian. Chi 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 chi. Numerous sounds of slashing that caused one's scalp to go numb resounded incessantly. Every single slashing sound would cause Yi Xian to retreat explosively while the woman continued slashing madly, slashing after slash, and she didn't give Yi Xian the slightest chance to catch his breath. But gradually, flying swords appeared all around the woman. These flying swords appeared without warning, and with the appearance of these flying swords, the woman's attacks slowed down. Right at this moment, Yi Xian suddenly charged forward and slashed down with his sword. How terrifying was the power of the executing heaven sword! Yi Xian's sword easily tore apart the space in front of him. On the other hand, the woman's expression changed slightly when she sensed Yi Xian's attack, and then she swiftly pressed her palms together. Eternal moment. As soon as she finished speaking, a ray of light suddenly shot out from the center of her palm. Bang! A world-shaking explosion suddenly resounded, and then both Yi Xian and the woman were pushed back repeatedly. Both of them moved over 1 kilometer back. As soon as Yi Xian stopped moving, his clothes had split apart, and blood sprayed from within them. There were no less than 30 marks on his body. Meanwhile, the woman's entire body was covered in a few dozen marks as well, and her clothes were dyed red with blood. Yi Xian had a rather solemn expression on his face. If he hadn't held the executing heaven sword just now, then he would have probably suffered a huge loss. This woman was so powerful. The woman gazed at Yi Xian. "You would have died a long time ago if you didn't possess that sword." Yi Xian smiled. Is that so? As soon as he finished speaking, he put the executing heaven sword away. In the next moment, 2 flying swords suddenly appeared around the woman. The woman reacted extremely quickly, and she raised her saber and slashed. Bang! The 2 swords were instantly blasted flying. But right at this moment, Yi Xian suddenly appeared in front of her, and he stabbed with his sword. This time, the sword in Yi Xian's hand was only an ordinary sword. The woman used 2 fingers to clamp down lightly on Yi Xian's sword. But right at this instant, Yi Xian suddenly released his grip and raised his knee. The woman's reaction was extremely swift, and she raised her knee as well at the instant Yi Xian raised his knee. Bang! Both of them moved apart as soon as they came into contact. But they'd only just moved apart when the 2 flying swords suddenly shot towards the woman. At the same time, Yi Xian suddenly vanished. Bang! Numerous explosions resounded incessantly. During this entire process, the woman was pushed back incessantly, and she moved almost 3 kilometers back in the end. Yi Xian stopped moving. At this moment, there were 3 scars on the woman's face. Blood seeped out incessantly. Yi Xian gazed at the woman and grinned. Am I strong? The woman wiped off the blood on her face and said, Shameless swordsman! You've succeeded in infuriating me. As soon as she finished speaking, she suddenly raised her head and roared furiously, The heavens are my saber! As soon as she finished speaking, a saber silently condensed into form in the sky. As soon as the saber appeared, a strand of monstrous pressure suddenly appeared in the sky, and this pressure locked onto Yi Xian. A moment later, the woman pointed furiously at Yi Xian. Chop him to death. Yi Xian was speechless. P.S. Today is the 1st, so everyone has a huge amount of free monthly tickets. Please get monthly tickets. Please get monthly tickets. To explain, the Divine Kingdom isn't related to the Divine Race at all. The Divine Race is a very young race, and the Divine Kingdom has only appeared recently. Please get monthly tickets. Chapter 604. As soon as the woman finished speaking, the saber above Yi Xian's head suddenly slashed down fiercely. Hiss! The saber seemed like it was going to split the sky in half, and it was extremely shocking. At this moment, Yi Xian's expression was rather solemn. Because the might of this saber was extremely powerful, Yi Xian didn't use his sword. He opened his palm and clenched it lightly. In an instant, the space above his head started to strangely reorganize and shrink. The woman's saber suddenly slowed down, and it was getting slower and slower. By the time it arrived above Yi Xian's head, the saber had stopped. However, its power was still there because the space above Yi Xian's head was trembling violently. However, the saber gradually calmed down and disappeared. Nearby, the woman blinked in a daze. That's it? Yi Xian waved his hand. He looked calm on the surface, but his heart was extremely solemn. Even though he'd used the Space Dao Law to erase the saber, the power contained within the saber was too great, so it wasn't easy for him. In the distance, the woman suddenly said, How did you do that? Yi Xian looked at the woman. Girl, I didn't want to kill you because you're cute. Otherwise, you would have been dead a long time ago. Understand? The woman's face was expressionless. Shameless swordsman, you must have used some sort of treasure again. At this point she paused slightly and said, Can I have a look? Yi Xian was speechless. When she saw Yi Xian remain silent, the woman grunted coldly. Swordsman, let me give you a piece of advice. Do you want to hear it? Yi Xian said, Tell me about it. The woman said seriously, If you keep using external objects, you'll lose yourself. That's not good for your sword Dao cultivation. Why don't you give all those treasures to me? I'm not afraid of losing myself, really. Yi Xian was dumbfounded. Why is this woman so powerful? The woman asked again. What do you think? I'm doing this for your own good. Yi Xian thought for a moment and said, I can give them to you, but I have a small request. The woman blinked. There are even requirements. Yi Xian nodded. It's just a small request. If you're willing to help me, I'll give you all the treasures. The woman thought for a moment and said, What request? First of all, I will not betray the divine race. Yi Xian said seriously, I don't want you to betray the divine race. My request is very simple. Look at me, I'm quite handsome, right? The woman blinked. Yi Xian sighed softly. Sigh, but you don't know that I'm still single. If anyone becomes my wife, won't all my treasures belong to her? The woman wiped off the blood on the corner of her mouth and said, My master said that when a man speaks flowery words to you, then it's most likely because he wants to sleep with you. You wouldn't be thinking of sleeping with me, right? Yi Xian was speechless. The woman suddenly said, Swordsman, come with me to see my master. As long as she agrees, I'll be your wife. Yi Xian was expressionless. I'm going to see your master. Let me ask you, can I still live after seeing her? After saying that, he turned around and left. This woman's tricks were really deep. Going to see her master? He was probably tired of living. The woman suddenly stood in front of Yi Xian. She clenched her fists in anger, but soon, she loosened her fists like a deflated balloon. Swordsman, you broke my saber. Can you pay me back? Yi Xian said. You want to kill me? The woman spread her hands and was somewhat puzzled. I want to kill you. What does that have to do with you compensating me with your saber? Yi Xian's face darkened. Please, you want to kill me, but you want me to compensate you with my saber? Why don't you go to heaven? The woman looked at Yi Xian. Will you compensate me or not? Yi Xian shook his head. No. The woman nodded slightly. She opened her palm, and a golden talisman suddenly soared into the sky, disappearing into the horizon. Yi Xian was a little curious. What's that? The woman said calmly. Call for help. Yi Xian. At this moment, more than 10 powerful auras suddenly attacked from the distant sky. Seeing this scene, Yi Xian's expression changed. He turned around and ran. At this moment, more than 10 people landed beside the woman. One of the men in the lead said in a deep voice, Junior Sisters Wujing, who was that? The woman named Wujing looked into the distance. A swordsman from the west. The man frowned slightly. Is he very strong? Wujing nodded. The man said, Chase him. Wujing shook her head. Don't chase him. Everyone looked at Wujing. Wujing lowered her head slightly. He stole my saber. Everyone. At the end of the distant sky, Yi Xian stopped. At this moment, the beam of light had also disappeared. Yi Xian sat cross-legged on the ground, his expression dark. He had snuck into the God Nation. How did the other party discover him? Did the God Nation discover him on its own, or did someone tip him off? If someone had tipped him off, who could it be? The Order Alliance. The first person that came to Yi Xian's mind was the Order Alliance. The Order Alliance wanted him dead the most. After a moment of silence, Yi Xian shook his head and stopped thinking about this question. Then he began to recuperate. Although he did not fight to the death with that woman, he had still expended a lot of energy, especially when he had activated the spatial Dao Law. This Dao Law was too terrifying. Every time he activated it, it consumed a lot of energy. Although it consumed a lot of energy, this Dao Law was still very powerful. 2 hours later, Yi Xian had more or less recovered. At this moment, Little Soul's voice suddenly sounded. Young Lord, I am about to break through. Yi Xian was stunned and then hurriedly said, You have reached the Dao realm. Little Soul's voice was a little excited. Yes. Young Lord, when can we go kill Thear Krell martial artists? If I absorb more of these martial artists, I will definitely be able to continue breaking through. Yi Xian's face darkened. Calm down first. Kill Thear Krell martial artists? What was this Little Soul thinking? At this moment Little Soul said, Young Lord, I might need 3 days. In these 3 days, I hope that Young Lord can use your sword intent to help me. Yi Xian asked, Can the sword intent help you? Little Soul said, Of course. Young Lord's sword intent is special. Moreover, Young Lord and I are connected mentally. Young Lord will be of great help to me. Yi Xian smiled. All right. I will go find a place. I will accompany you in breaking through. Little Soul said, Thank you, Young Lord. Yi Xian smiled slightly. What are you thanking me for? With that, he turned and disappeared on the spot. At the Great Wall. At this moment, there were many martial artists on the Great Wall. These martial artists had come from various desolate domains. These martial artists were excited. They were not the least bit afraid. This was because, according to the Lawful Order Alliance and the other factions, God Nation was not that strong. After all, God Nation had once invaded but was stopped at God Burial Plains by Gu Tatian alone. Every time they thought of this, they became fearless. They even hoped that God Nation would attack sooner. War could kill, but it could also lead to riches. The rewards offered by the Lawful Order Alliance and the other factions were very tempting. Moreover, God Nation would definitely offer many benefits. How much would they gain if they conquered God Nation? But now, there was still no movement from God Nation. Therefore, some martial artists on the Great Wall could not wait any longer. They wanted to fight. Counterattack. Many martial artists he suggested striking first to gain the upper hand and counterattack the Divine Kingdom. However, Perfected Master Chu and the others did not agree. Wait. They were waiting for Yi Xian to bring them information about God Nation's situation. However, within the Great Wall, more and more people sought to fight. Perfected Master Chu and the others did not suppress them by force because doing so would affect their morale. On the contrary, it was a good thing that these people were so eager to fight. Because of this, there were countless people on the Great Wall shouting for a counterattack on the Divine Kingdom every day. Yi Xian found a secluded cave in a mountain range. He glanced at the surroundings and then entered the prison pagoda. To help Little Soul improve. If Little Soul could attain the Tao realm, then his combat strength would definitely improve greatly. After all, Little Soul's current abilities were extremely terrifying. Little Soul floated silently in front of Yi Xian. Young Lord, I need a lot of sword intent. Yi Xian nodded. In the next moment, countless sword intents appeared, and then they surged towards Soul. It didn't take long for Little Soul to start absorbing Yi Xian's sword intent madly. Not far away, Xiao Ling sat beside the Emperor Hound. She leaned against it and occasionally took a bite of the fruit in her hand. Xiao Ling glanced at Yi Xian and Little Soul, then looked at the right corner. There, a piece of armor was trembling. The Heavenly God armor. This armor had been in a terrible state recently because it had been chased by Xiao Ling every single day. Moreover, Xiao Ling had no intention of letting it go. After a while, Xiao Ling patted her stomach. She was full. So, she stood up and charged towards the Heavenly God armor with her sword. The Heavenly God armor. God Nation. How big was God Nation? No one knew. All they knew was that the entire Eastern Wasteland world was God Nation's territory. The Divine Capital. The Divine Capital was the center of power in God Nation. It was also the most prosperous city in God Nation. There were a total of 18 divine veins in this city. The Divine Capital was not particularly big, but the entire city was filled with an ancient aura. In the center of the city, there was a statue of a woman that was hundreds of meters tall. The woman had her hands behind her back and looked at the starry sky coldly. This person was the creator of God Nation. Wu Anning. Rumor had it that there were hundreds of big and small countries in the Eastern Wasteland world. It was the most chaotic of the 4 wastelands. Not only that, there were many large and small sects and forces in the Eastern Wasteland world. It could be said that the Eastern Wasteland world was extremely complicated and chaotic. This situation continued until Wu Anning appeared. This legendary woman had once said, "I want the world to be at peace." Therefore, she unified the entire Eastern Wasteland world in less than 5 years. Not only that, God Nation was the only country in the chaotic universe where imperial power was greater than anything else. This was because in the God Nation, all sects and families had to follow the orders of the Divine Lord. No one dared to disobey an imperial edict. It was worth mentioning that the position of Divine Lord in God Nation was not hereditary. It was abdicated. The next God Lord of a divine kingdom was personally chosen by the previous God Lord. The chosen person had to be the best in terms of strength, talent, and intelligence. This was because if they were not outstanding enough, they would not be able to convince the public. It was precisely for this reason that every God Lord in the Divine Kingdom was a monster among monsters. In front of the Divine Palace, a little girl looked at Wu Anning's statue in the distance quietly. There was a sword at her waist. At this moment, an elder appeared behind the little girl. The elder bowed slightly. "Your Highness, the 8 kings and 26 saints have arrived." The little girl nodded slightly and turned to leave. Chapter 605. 3 days later, inside the World Prison Pagoda. Inside the pagoda, soul-suppressing sword was still frantically devouring Yi Xian's sword intent, and at this moment, Yi Xian's face was extremely pale, somewhat frightening. Because for the past 3 days, he had been frantically giving sword intent to soul-suppressing sword every day, and this consumption was too great. At this moment, soul-suppressing sword suddenly trembled violently, and a powerful aura suddenly rippled out. Boom! Yi Xian was jolted back again and again, and when he stopped, he looked at soul-suppressing sword in front of him. At this time, an excited voice suddenly sounded in Yi Xian's mind. "Young master, I broke through." Yi Xian hurriedly said, "Dao realm." Little soul said, "Yes." As it spoke, it floated in front of Yi Xian. Yi Xian gripped the sword, and in an instant, a powerful force surged toward him like a tide. Yi Xian was startled. "Little soul, this is?" Little soul said, "Soul power." "Soul power?" Yi Xian asked. "Soul power." Little soul said, "Yes, this is soul power. In the future, young master can borrow my soul power at any time. This soul power can greatly strengthen young master's soul, and has many benefits for young master. For example, if young master uses this soul power when activating the flying sword, it can make the flying sword faster. In addition, the strength of the soul power can also let young master resist some soul attacks. Of course, the most important thing is that I have become more powerful." Yi Xian asked with a smile, "How powerful?" Little soul said, "I can now easily kill Dao realm powerhouses, unless their souls are especially powerful, otherwise, I can easily separate their souls from their bodies. In addition, when young master uses me to fight in the future, I can also affect the enemy's soul. This is called soul snatching. In any case, it is very powerful." Yi Xian said with a smile, "Good thing." Little soul said, "Many thanks for young master's nurturing." Yi Xian shook his head slightly. "Little guy, you are too polite. These past few years, you have helped a lot. Moreover, there is no need for thanks between us." Soul fell silent for a moment and then said, "All right." Yi Xian smiled and sat down to absorb the divinity crystal. Roughly 2 hours later, Yi Xian left the World Prison Pagoda and headed towards the Divine Nation. He was very curious about the Divine Nation, because the Divine Nation was too mysterious to them. Yi Xian snuck back to the castle again. After making some inquiries, he left the castle and headed for the Divine Nation's divine capital. God's capital was the center of power in the God Nation. This time, he was not only going to see the strength of the God Nation, but he was also going to search for the Tao Law. After entering the border of the Divine Nation, Yi Xian found that the spirit qi in the Divine Nation was much more abundant than in the other deserted worlds. Moreover, there were many spirit veins between the mountains, and some of them were even celestial-grade spirit veins. In the other deserted worlds, the wild spirit veins had basically all been plundered. But here, there were so many wild spirit veins, and no one was fighting for them. Yi Xian was a little tempted, but he didn't do it. Because this was definitely not normal. There must be some strong cultivators guarding these spirit veins. And his main task now was to search for the Tao Law. Therefore, Yi Xian didn't have any ideas about the spirit veins. Just like that, 3 days later, Yi Xian finally arrived at the Divine Nation's divine capital. Yi Xian stood in front of the divine capital's gate. The divine capital before him wasn't as big as he had imagined. In fact, it was a little ancient. However, the entire city had a heavy aura. Precipitation. This city must have experienced the precipitation of countless years to have this kind of charm. Just as Yi Xian was about to sneak into the city, a woman suddenly appeared in front of Yi Xian. Yi Xian was speechless. From her appearance, the woman looked to be in her 20s. Her hair was tied into a ponytail, and she wore a very clean white robe. She held a folding fan in her hand, looking elegant yet heroic. The woman sized up Yi Xian and smiled. "Are you Yi Xian?" Yi Xian nodded with a calm expression. The woman smiled. "Hello, let's get to know each other. I'm Nangong Wan, a small strategist by His Majesty's side." Yi Xian thought about it and said, "Hello, I'm Yi Xian, the City Lord of Divine Martial City." Nangong Wan smiled. "There's no need to be on guard, City Lord Yi. Our divine nation is hospitable, and we won't do anything unfriendly to our guests. Of course, the prerequisite is that the guest is friendly as well." Yi Xian asked in a low voice. How did you find me? Nan Gongwan smiled. Many ways. Yi Xian sighed. It seemed like he had underestimated this divine nation. Meanwhile, Nan Gongwan suddenly said, City Lord Yi, I heard that you wanted to see the strength of our divine nation. So, His Majesty sent me to receive you and show you around a few important places in our divine nation. Yi Xian thought about it and said, You're so friendly. I'm a little panicked. Nan Gongwan smiled. City Lord Yi, you must be joking. City Lord Yi dared to come to our divine nation by yourself, and that's enough to show your courage. If you're willing, you can come with me to see some places in our divine nation. If you're unwilling, you can leave on your own, and we won't stop you. Yi Xian asked, Why? Nan Gongwan blinked. No reason. Yi Xian fell silent for a moment, and then he nodded. Then I'll be troubling you, Miss Nan Gong. Nan Gongwan smiled. Her smile was like a blooming flower, and it was very beautiful. Yi Xian said seriously, Miss Nan Gong is really beautiful when you smile. Nan Gongwan smiled. Thank you for your praise, City Lord Yi. Please follow me. After she finished speaking, she gestured for him to follow, and then she walked towards the center of the city. Yi Xian followed her. On the street, Yi Xian noticed that there were cavalrymen passing by from time to time, and they all emanated a murderous aura. Very strong. And when these cavalrymen passed by him and Nan Gongwan, they would stop, and then they would slightly bow to Nan Gongwan, and Nan Gongwan would also return the bow. On the way, Yi Xian asked, Miss Nan Gong's identity seems to be unusual. Nan Gongwan smiled. She's closer to His Majesty, you know. Yi Xian nodded, and then he asked, Miss Nan Gong, are there many geniuses in the divine nation? Nan Gongwan nodded. Yes. Yi Xian said, I'd like to hear the details. Nan Gongwan said, In our divine nation, there is a list called the Divine Martial List. There are 10 people on the list, and these 10 people are the most powerful of our divine nation's younger generation. Yi Xian asked, I remember that there is a girl with a saber. She's quite young, what's her ranking? Nan Gongwan looked at Yi Xian. A girl with a saber? Yi Xian nodded, and then he described the young woman on the horse that he'd fought earlier. After a short while, Nan Gongwan smiled and said, Young Master Yi should be talking about Xueqi. She's from the saber sect, and she isn't on the divine martial list. Yi Xian frowned slightly. She isn't on the divine martial list? Why? Nan Gongwan said, Because she wasn't able to defeat the person ranked 10th on the divine martial list. Yi Xian's expression instantly became solemn when he heard this. That woman actually isn't qualified to be on the divine martial list with her strength. Is the woman in front of me trying to scare me? As if she knew what Yi Xian was thinking, Nan Gongwan smiled and said, There is a fellow on the divine martial list in the city, and I'll bring young Master Yi to experience him later. Yi Xian nodded. All right. In next to no time, Nan Gongwan brought Yi Xian to an academy. The Oceanic Academy. Nan Gongwan and Yi Xian had just arrived before the academy's entrance when a middle-aged man came out to greet them. The middle-aged man bowed slightly to Nan Gongwan and said, So it's State Scholar Nan Gong. Please forgive me for not going out to meet you. Nan Gongwan returned the bow and said, Scholar Su, you're too kind. I've come this time to bring City Governor Yi to tour the Oceanic Academy. I wonder if it's convenient for your academy now? Scholar Su smiled and said, Of course it's convenient. Please. Nan Gongwan looked at Yi Xian and said, City Governor Yi, please. As soon as she finished speaking, she led Yi Xian towards the academy. There was a Xiao Dao in front of them, and the Xiao Dao wound its way up a mountain. The three of them walked silently like this. All along the way, students that passed by would bow to Scholar Su and Nan Gongwan. On the way, Nan Gongwan suddenly asked, Young Master Yi, is there an academy in your world? Yi Xian thought for a moment and said, I don't think there is. Nan Gongwan looked at Yi Xian and said, Do you only focus on cultivation over there? Yi Xian nodded and said, Yes. Nan Gongwan shook her head and said, How can that be? If a person doesn't study and only focuses on cultivation, then even if he possesses formidable strength, he will still be mediocre in terms of spirit and thinking. Yi Xian smiled and said, Miss Nan Gong, you might have misunderstood. We don't have many academies over there. But it's not that we don't study. It's just that we don't pay as much attention to it as you do here. When he was in Qingqing, he had also studied and learned to read when he was very young. Nangongwan nodded and said, "If my divine nation goes to your world, we will definitely open more academies so that more people can not only cultivate but also study." Yi Xian smiled and said, "Miss Nangong, you make the invasion sound so righteous?" Nangongwan said, "Young Master Yi, your world is already lagging behind, and it's lagging behind a lot. It's not a bad thing for us to go there." Yi Xian said, "Many people will die." Nangongwan said, "People will definitely die in war, but it will be a blessing for generations to come." Yi Xian looked at Nangongwan and said, "You're not a fish, so how can you know the happiness of a fish? Perhaps peace is more important to your side." Nangongwan smiled and said, "We've received news that many people on your side are preparing to take the initiative to attack my divine nation." Yi Xian frowned and said, "Take the initiative to attack?" Nangongwan smiled and said, "You see, you don't like peace. If the Order Alliance on your side was strong enough, I think they would have already brought their people to attack my divine nation." She shook her head and then said softly, "The chaotic universe is very, very big. There are countless forces in the 4 desolate worlds, and these forces fight all year round. Do you know how many people die every year? If my divine nation unifies the chaotic universe, then everyone can live in peace and compete with each other. Isn't that better?" Yi Xian said in a low voice, "You are invading." Nangongwan smiled and said, "But what if your side attacks first?" Yi Xian fell silent for a moment and said, "Then kill them. Remember, you must kill the leader of the Order Alliance first. I've been unhappy with them for a long time." Nangongwan was speechless. Chapter 606. Yi Xian wasn't lying. There were 2 reasons why he came to the Great Wall. First, he had to come. If he didn't come, the Star-Lord and the others would definitely target him and Shenwu City. Second, he knew the principle of, when the nest is overturned, no eggs remain intact. If the Order Alliance, the Tang clan, and the monster race were all destroyed, Shenwu City would definitely be destroyed. Under such circumstances, he decisively chose to resist the divine race. But if the Order Alliance and the others were greedy and wanted to attack the divine race, he would absolutely not allow it. He wouldn't let the people of Shenwu City be bullied, but he wouldn't take the initiative to invade others either. Yi Xian's words stunned Nangongwan. Obviously, she didn't expect Yi Xian to say that. After a while, Nangongwan chuckled. "Young Master Yi, you're a little special." Yi Xian was about to speak, but at this moment, they heard someone reading aloud not far from them. Yi Xian and Nangongwan looked over. Not far away, there were 30 students reading aloud with scrolls in their hands. At this moment, Scholar Su suddenly said, "State Scholar Nangong, this is City Lord Yi from the West. My students want to ask him some questions. Is it possible?" Nangongwan smiled and said, "Scholar Su, you have to ask City Lord Yi himself." Scholar Su looked at Yi Xian and said, "I wonder if City Lord Yi can enlighten me?" Yi Xian smiled and said, "I don't dare to enlighten you. Just treat it as a discussion." Scholar Su nodded and looked not far away. There, a woman suddenly walked over. The woman was about 18 or 19 years old. She had delicate features and was very beautiful. She was wearing a long black dress and was holding a thick book in her arms. The woman came in front of Yi Xian and Nangongwan and bowed to Nangongwan. "Greetings, State Scholar Nangong." Nangongwan smiled and said, "No need to be so polite." The woman nodded and looked at Yi Xian and said, "City Lord Yi, nice to meet you. I'm Fong Wenqing, Songhai Academy's chief scholar. Please enlighten me, State Scholar Yi." Yi Xian smiled and said, "Just call me Yi Xian." Fong Wenqing nodded slightly. "Young Master Yi, what do you think of the relationship between our divine kingdom and your side?" Yi Xian thought for a moment and said, "Hostile." Fong Wenqing said, "What young Master Yi sees is only hostility, but what I see is hope, your hope. There are 3 deserted worlds on your side. There are countless forces and billions of lives in these 3 deserted worlds. The environment they are living in right now can only be described as abyss of suffering." Yi Xian asked, "Why?" Fong Wenqing said, "Although there are internal conflicts in our theocracy, There has never been a large-scale war. As for the commoners, as long as they were willing, they could study and cultivate. As for our god nation, we have an imperial examination system. As long as you have genuine talent, you can enter the imperial court and serve the country. At this point, she bowed slightly to Nangong Wan and said, Nangong Kingdom Scholar was just a girl from an ordinary family, but through her own hard work, she became a kingdom scholar respected by countless people. Nangong Wan smiled and said nothing. Fong Wenqing looked at Yi Xian and said, if our god nation enters your side, it will indeed harm the interests of some of the major forces on your side, but it can benefit billions of people. Not only this generation but for generations to come. Yi Xian was silent for a moment. Then he looked not far away and saw a student holding a birdcage. Yi Xian walked in front of the student and said with a smile, can you lend it to me for a moment? The student glanced at Yi Xian and then handed the birdcage to Yi Xian. Lord Yi, this is my beloved thing. Please don't hurt it. Yi Xian smiled and said, I won't. After saying that, he turned to look at Fong Wenqing and said, Miss Fong, do you see this birdcage? In his opinion, he raised this bird and fed it with delicacies every day, so it must be very happy. But is that really the case? As he spoke, he opened the birdcage. In the next moment, the bird flew out and disappeared into the distance in the blink of an eye. The student next to Yi Xian's expression changed. He grabbed the bird with his right hand and directly pulled it back. He glared fiercely at Yi Xian and then put the bird back into the birdcage. The bird kept jumping around in the birdcage. Yi Xian looked at Fong Wenqing and said, Miss Fong, do you see that? You think that you started the war for our good, but in my opinion, it's a bit like you want to be a whore and build a chastity memorial. Moreover, Miss Fong, war is often a kind of plunder. If you go there, can you guarantee that the forces on your side won't go crazy and plunder? Or even enslave the people there? If you really want to help them, why don't you communicate with us? As long as the people on our side understand your side, I believe that many people will definitely be willing to come over to your side. Why do you have to start a war? After saying that, he shook his head and smiled. In the end, war is cruel. No matter what the reason is, it's cruel. Fong Wenqing shook her head and said, Cruelty is only temporary. Yi Xian looked at Fong Wenqing and in the next moment, he suddenly drew his sword. The sword was very fast. Before Fong Wenqing could react, Yi Xian's sword was already at the center of her eyebrows. Everyone's expression changed, but Fong Wenqing's expression was calm and not a trace of fear. Yi Xian looked at Fong Wenqing and said, Miss Fong, I think you're beautiful. Why don't you be my wife? Fong Wenqing looked at Yi Xian and said, Young Master Yi, what do you mean? Yi Xian smiled and said, You'll live a good life if you follow me. Even though you don't agree now and even feel disrespected, it's fine. I'll treat you well in the future. In any case, cruelty is only temporary. How could Fong Wenqing not understand Yi Xian's meaning? She fell silent. Yi Xian said, Imposing one's will on another is a cruel and immoral thing. As he spoke, he sheathed his sword and said with a smile, I, Yi Xian, have relied on the sword in my hand to arrive here from Pine City. I rarely reason with others. Because in my opinion, 10 sentences of reasoning aren't as effective as a single sword strike in our world. After he finished speaking, he looked at Nangong Wan and said, Miss Nangong, I finished reasoning with you. Can you take me somewhere else? Nangong Wan nodded slightly and said, Young Master Yi, follow me. As soon as she finished speaking, the two of them intended to leave. However, right at this moment, a man stepped forward from afar, and he stood in front of Yi Xian and said, I challenge you. Fong Wenqing frowned slightly and said, Emo Lin, what are you doing? The man called Emo Lin looked Yi Xian in the eye and said, Do you dare? Yi Xian asked, What's the reason? Emo Lin gazed at Yi Xian and said, I don't like the sight of you. As soon as he finished speaking, one of his arms suddenly flew into the air. Blood sprayed. Everyone here was stunned. Scholar Su's face sank. Yi Xian's sword was too swift, and he wasn't able to stop it at all. Emo Lin's face was pale as he stared fixedly at Yi Xian without a trace of fear in his eyes, and he said, Kill me if you can. Yi Xian shook his head and smiled. Look at you. You say you don't like the sight of me, but on what basis? Because of that mouth of yours? After you noticed that you couldn't defeat me, you said that I would kill you if I could. Why do you dare to say that? Because you feel that you have the Ocean Academy behind you, and I'm in the Ocean Academy right now. So, you're fearless and feel that I would definitely not dare to kill you. Is that so? Mo Lin stared fixedly at Yi Xian, and his gaze seemed capable of killing. Yi Xian chuckled and said, being angry yet not attacking is the sign of a powerless person. Since you don't like the sight of me, then hit me. Hurry up and hit me. Mo Lin's face was livid with rage. He'd wanted to attack Chen Shi on many occasions, but he didn't dare to, because he knew that Chen Shi could end his life with a single strike of his sword. Right at this moment, Yi Xian suddenly said, I don't like the sight of you as well. As soon as he finished speaking, he raised his hand and slapped Mo Lin. Slap. Mo Lin's figure was blasted flying, and he flew for over 300 m. Mo Lin crashed to the ground 300 m away, but he quickly stood up and glared angrily at Yi Xian. When had he ever suffered such humiliation? He was about to attack Mo Lin when Scholar Su suddenly said, take him away and expel him from the academy. Mo Lin was stunned when he heard this. In next to no time, 2 guards of the academy took Mo Lin away. Scholar Su gazed at Yi Xian and said, I've embarrassed myself in front of City Governor Yi. Yi Xian smiled and said, I was a bit impulsive just now. I hope Scholar Su can forgive me. Scholar Su shook his head and said, young man, suffering a loss isn't a bad thing. It would be a good thing if he can learn a lesson from this incident. Yi Xian smiled, and then he looked at Nangong Wan and said, Miss Nangong, can I go take a look at your imperial palace? Nangong Wan smiled and said, it's the Divine Palace. Yi Xian nodded and said, can I go take a look? Nangong Wan nodded and said, you can. However, you can only see a portion of the outer area. Yi Xian nodded and said, all right. Nangong Wan looked at Scholar Su and said, Scholar Su, farewell. Scholar Su bowed slightly and said, take care, State Scholar Nangong. Nangong Wan nodded and then she left with Yi Xian. On the way, Nangong Wan smiled and said, young Master Yi, do you know why Mo Lin doesn't like you? Yi Xian smiled and said, he's interested in that Miss Fong. Nangong Wan nodded and said, young Master Yi pointed his sword at Miss Fong at the end. He should be angry. Yi Xian smiled and said, I don't have any bad intentions. Nangong Wan smiled and said, I know. You only chopped off one of his hands. Yi Xian was speechless. After a while, Yi Xian and Nangong Wan arrived at the Divine Palace. As soon as they entered the Divine Palace, they saw Wu Anning's statue. Looking at the statue, Yi Xian said softly, is this the founder of your god nation? Nangong Wan nodded and said, my god nation's first-generation divine master. Just as Yi Xian was about to speak, Yi Xian suddenly looked to his right. There was a person there. When he saw that person, Yi Xian was shocked and said, how could it be you? You. P.S. Kidney damage. What kind of food is more nutritious? I'm asking on behalf of the readers. Chapter 607. He knew the newcomer. And it was an old friend. The State Preceptor Lu he had met in the kingdom of Jiang. At this moment, State Preceptor Lu was still sitting in a wheelchair, his hair still white. State Preceptor Lu looked at Yi Xian and smiled. Young Master Yi, long time no see. Yi Xian said in a low voice. State Preceptor Lu, you? State Preceptor Lu smiled. My name is Lu Yu, and I'm from the Kingdom of God. The Kingdom of God. Yi Xian said in a deep voice. What about Mo Yuan and Feng Lan? Lu Yu said, they're from the Confucian school. Yi Xian shook his head and smiled. If you're from the Kingdom of God, why would you go to such a small place? Shangguan Wan smiled. Miss Lu Yu and the others are only going to the small world to spread our Kingdom of God's culture. Young Master, you might not know this, but your Qingzhou already has the Confucian school and the military school, which add up to 100 schools. And now, the Kingdom of Jiang and the Firmament World's Firmament Sword Sect are developing so fast that it might be beyond young Master Ye's imagination. Unfortunately, you've been busy all these years. Otherwise, you'd be surprised if you went back. Yi Xian said in a low voice. Why are you doing this? What's your purpose? Lu Yu said softly. To spread our own culture. Yi Xian asked. Then why go to such a small place? Lu Yu smiled. Going to the great world would attract too much attention and cause a lot of trouble. Moreover, there are too many forces in the great world. It's difficult to spread one's own culture peacefully. Yi Xian was silent. Lu Yu said again, "Young Master Yi, if you have time, you must return to the firmament world. Great changes have happened there. You'll be surprised." Yi Xian nodded. "I will." Lu Yu smiled. "I won't disturb young Master Yi today." With that, she turned and left. Yi Xian said softly, "Besides the firmament world, you have people in other worlds, right?" Shangguan Wan nodded. "Quite a few." Yi Xian shook his head with a smile. "You have a lot of plans." Shangguan Wan said softly, "I agree with what young Master Yi said in Songhai College. War is cruel, but young Master Yi, does it mean that it's even crueler? We have a team of advisors who are always studying your side. Your side has been at war all year round, and the ultimate reason is that it's too scattered. All the forces, aristocratic families, as well as sects big and small, have their own way of doing things. On your side, there's no culture or spiritual belief, and you only believe in the strong. Yuz is Yi, and Yi King gods who is. Yes Yi King Yu temple? Kingdom Yu King of Yi, Yu Can of Kingdom." Yi Xian said king. Wei Xian said Guan Xian of. Not in any way derogatory, at least not from me. I Sir, I Precation, I Lu Precipin, I Precoff, I Xian King, I Xian. There was Chung Yi I Shi I Yi I Prek King Xian I King Long Prek He, one Master Xian one, Prek and Prek they were masters of 100 battles. Yi Xian had sensed this Precipin from the Tang clan cavalry. Yi Xian knew that these Precipin soldiers were not the Kingdom of God's most elite soldiers. The Precipin soldiers came to Yi Xian and Shangguan Wan. They bowed to Shangguan Wan and left. Yi Xian glanced at Shangguan Wan. "Miss Shangguan is highly respected by the Kingdom of God." Shangguan Wan said with a smile, "The Kingdom of God respects not only the strong, but also the learned. The Kingdom of God is divided into two factions, the civil and the martial. Even though the divine image of the Kingdom of God cultivates, it's only to strengthen his body. I'm afraid he can't even defeat a soldier. But he's highly respected in the Kingdom of God. Even the Master God has to address him as teacher." She made an inviting gesture. "Young Master Yi, let's meet the commander of the Kingdom of God's Imperial Guard. He's ranked 10th on the divine martial list." Yi Xian nodded and continued to move forward with Shangguan Wan. Soon after, at Shangguan Wan's place. Under Shangguan Wan's lead, the two of them arrived at a training field. There were hundreds of soldiers on the training field, and they were currently training. And in front of these hundreds of soldiers stood a young man. The young man was dressed in plain clothes. He stood ramrod straight and held a long spear in his hand. When he saw Yi Xian and Shangguan Wan, the young man walked straight over and bowed slightly to Shangguan Wan. "Greetings, Kingdom Scholar Shangguan." Shangguan Wan smiled. "Ling Yi, would you like to have a spar with our city lord Yi?" Ling Yi looked at Yi Xian. "Please enlighten me." A moment later, the two of them appeared on a sparring platform in the training field. There were hundreds of soldiers standing around them. Ling Yi looked at Yi Xian and made an inviting gesture. Yi Xian looked up at Ling Yi. The next moment, a flying sword appeared in front of Ling Yi without any warning. Ling Yi was expressionless. He raised his hand and shot. Clang! The flying sword was instantly sent flying. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly appeared in front of Ling Yi. Almost at the same time, Ling Yi stabbed with his spear. Boom! Yi Xian was forced to a stop, but Ling Yi was also forced to retreat several steps. The moment he stopped, a flying sword suddenly slashed at him. Ling Yi held his spear horizontally. Clang! An ear-piercing sound of metal clashing rang out. Ling Yi retreated several meters, but in the next moment, his body spun, and the spear in his hand pierced forward. Chi! The spear stabbed out, and the space was directly torn apart. Boom! Yi Xian was instantly forced to retreat, but the next moment, several flying swords slashed at Ling Yi from different angles. Ling Ye's expression did not change, and he swung his spear swiftly. Boom 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 boom. All the flying swords were blocked by Ling Ye's spear. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly disappeared. When he reappeared, he was already in front of Ling Yi. At the same time, he drew his sword and slashed. It was only a creation-grade sword, which was at the same level as Ling Ye's spear. Since it was a spar, he naturally would not use heavenly punishment. Drawing his sword would determine life and death. As the sword slashed down, a powerful sword aura instantly enveloped Ling Yi. When he sensed the power in Yi Xian's sword, Ling Ye's calm expression finally changed. He stomped his right foot, and a powerful force suddenly appeared around his body. The next moment, he thrust his spear forward. It was a thrust. It was a simple movement, but it carried a tremendous force. It was a clash of pure strength. Boom! The moment the two swords and spears collided, they separated and retreated rapidly. However, very quickly, the two of them stopped at the same time. At this moment, Ling Yi suddenly leaped into the air. In the air, Ling Ye's expression was slightly malevolent, and the spear in his hand suddenly shot towards Yi Xian. The spear pierced through the air, as though it wanted to pierce through heaven and earth. Yi Xian lightly tapped his right foot, and his entire body rose from the ground. Almost at the same time, a sword light slashed against the spear. Boom! The surrounding space trembled violently, and in the next moment, under the astonished gazes of everyone, countless flying swords slashed towards Ling Yi. The sky was filled with flying swords. In the air, Ling Yi retreated again and again. In front of him, Yi Xian frantically drew his sword and slashed repeatedly. In addition to the flying swords in the surroundings, it was difficult for Ling Yi to deal with them. This was because Yi Xian's flying swords were too fast. They were so fast that he didn't dare to be distracted. In addition, Yi Xian was fiercely attacking in front of him, so he could only passively defend. He wanted to attack a few times, but he was interrupted by Yi Xian's flying swords. Just like that, when Ling Yi retreated several hundred meters away, Yi Xian suddenly stopped. At this moment, there were more than 10 sword marks around Ling Ye's body. Yi Xian sheathed his sword and said, "Thank you for letting me win." Ling Yi looked at Yi Xian and said, "I've lost." As soon as he said this, the expressions of the soldiers in the field changed. This Ling Yi was a genius on the divine martial role. He had actually lost? At this moment, a laughter suddenly sounded from the side. "Commander Ling, you're wrong." Everyone looked over and saw a young man wearing a black robe with dragon patterns. Yi Xian looked at the youth. Beside him, Nan Gongwan said, "Shang Qiu, the commander of the Featherwood Guard." Yi Xian nodded slightly. Shang Qiu first bowed slightly at Nan Gongwan, then looked at Yi Xian and said with a smile, "City Lord Yi, the battle just now was a little unfair." Yi Xian laughed and said, "How is it unfair?" Shang Qiu smiled and said, "Commander Ling is the commander of the Imperial Guards. What he cultivates is how to kill people. This regular martial arts competition has too many restrictions on him. City Lord Yi, haven't you noticed that Commander Ling has always been merciful?" At this point he smiled. "City Lord Yi, he's afraid of killing you." Not far away, Ling Yi frowned. "Shang Qiu, I've lost. I can afford to lose." Shang Qiu looked at Ling Yi. "You are now representing my god nation. You have to think this through." Ling Yi was silent. Shang Qiu looked at Yi Xian. "City Lord Yi, let's have a rematch without any restrictions. It's the kind that puts your life on the line. Do you want to play?" Yi Xian was a little hesitant. Shang Qiu smiled and said, "If City Lord Yi is afraid, it's fine." Yi Xian gritted his teeth. "It's not impossible to have a rematch, but I have a request. I want to place a bet." Shang Qiu raised his eyebrows. "What bet?" Yi Xian looked at Shang Qiu. "If you lose, you have to give me a Dao Realm treasure." Dao Realm treasure. Shang Qiu's face darkened when he heard this. This thing was very precious even in the Divine Kingdom. Seeing Shang Qiu's silence, Yi Xian's expression immediately relaxed, and he even smiled. "No. If not, then there's no need to compete." Shang Qiu looked at Yi Xian, who said there isn't. As he said this, he opened his palm, and a small golden person suddenly appeared in his palm. Yi Xian was a little curious. "What is this?" Nan Gongwan smiled and said, "A golden man, a Dao Realm golden man created by the Mo family. When activated, this golden man is comparable to a pinnacle Dao mastery expert. If there is enough spiritual qi, it can even contend against a Tendo expert. Moreover, it is made of special materials, and even a Tendo expert cannot destroy it in a short time. It's very useful for protecting one's life in a fight. Also, it's very precious. Yi Xian nodded slightly. He had some golden men in the past, but they were very weak now. This one in front of him should be an upgraded version. At this moment, Qiu suddenly said, "What if you lose?" Yi Xian said in a low voice, "If I lose, I will leave my life here, and all my treasures will be yours." Qiu looked at Yi Xian. "Remember what you said?" Yi Xian nodded. "Under normal circumstances, I still keep my word." Qiu said indifferently, "Then let's begin." Yi Xian said, "Give the treasures to Nangong Guasher." Qiu glanced at Yi Xian, then gave the little golden man to Nangong Wan. Yi Xian looked at Ling Yi, and the latter bowed slightly. "This battle concerns the honor of our god nation, so I will not hold back. You must also do your best." Yi Xian nodded. "All right." As soon as he finished speaking, he opened his right palm, and a sword appeared in it. Soul-suppressing sword. A Dao realm sword. When they saw this sword, Ling Yi and Qiu's expressions changed. At this moment, Yi Xian opened his left hand, and the executing heaven sword appeared in his hand. When he saw the executing heaven sword, Qiu's expression changed. A sword that surpasses the Dao realm. Ling Ye's expression became extremely ugly. At this moment, Yi Xian carried the two swords and walked towards Ling Yi. "Brother Ling, don't hold back. If I use these two swords, your spear might not be able to withstand it. If you really can't, go borrow a few more spears." Ling Yi. Chapter 608. The atmosphere in the surroundings suddenly became slightly silent. A Dao realm sword, a sword that surpassed the Dao realm. Moreover, it was in the hands of a sword saint. How could he fight? Ling Ye's face was filled with bitterness. If Yi Xian fought him fairly, he would still be confident. However, when he saw the two swords, he completely despaired. Even if he took out a Dao realm spear, he wouldn't be able to withstand the sword that surpassed the Dao realm. A sword that surpassed the Dao realm. In the hands of Yi Xian, the increase in battle strength wasn't just a little bit. Yi Xian looked at Ling Yi. "Brother Ling, make your move." Ling Yi looked at Yi Xian. In the next moment, he suddenly dashed forward, and the spear in his hand rushed out like a raging dragon. Bang! As this spear shot out, the surrounding space shook violently. Yi Xian slashed down with the sword in his left hand. Chi! The sword slashed down, and Ling Ye's spear was directly split into two. Ling Yi, who was about to continue his attack, stopped. Looking at the broken spear in front of him, Ling Yi fell silent. Yi Xian said, "Brother Ling Yi, do you still want to fight?" Ling Yi shook his head. "I can't defeat you." His tone was calm, but it carried a trace of anger. This was clearly bullying. Yi Xian looked at Qiu, who was not far away. The latter was about to speak, but Yi Xian suddenly smiled. "You wouldn't say that I'm unfair to Brother Ling Yi with these two swords, right?" Qiu said in a deep voice. "This is unfair." Yi Xian laughed. "Unfair? Who fought to the death just now? Who didn't have any restrictions? Didn't you say so?" Qiu's expression was quite unsightly. Yi Xian smiled coldly. "So this is a genius of God Nation. I, Yi Xian, don't want this Dao realm treasure anymore." As he spoke, he looked at Nangong Wan. "Miss Nangong, farewell." After that, he turned around and left. At this time, Nangong Wan suddenly appeared beside Yi Xian. "Young Master Yi, don't you want this treasure?" Yi Xian said indifferently. "I don't dare. God Nation's geniuses are so shameless. This has truly refreshed my understanding of shamelessness. I don't want this. I don't want it even if you give it to me." With that, he quickened his pace. Nangong Wan turned around to glance at Qiu. The latter's expression was rather unsightly, and he hesitated for a moment before he said, "Young Master Yi, wait a moment." However, Yi Xian did not stop. Qiu's expression changed. Finally, he suddenly appeared in front of Yi Xian. "Young Master Yi, my words were inappropriate. You win. That treasure is yours." Yi Xian said indifferently. "Commander Shang, you seem to be slightly disgruntled." Qiu said indifferently. "What else does young Master Yi want?" Yi Xian glanced at the golden figure and said, Why don't we make another bet? Qiu gazed at Yi Xian. Yi Xian said, let's have another competition. I won't use these two swords. How about it? Qiu's eyes narrowed slightly. Really? Yi Xian nodded. Really? If you win, I'll return this little golden man to you. However, if you lose, you'll have to give me another little golden man or a Dao realm treasure. Do you dare to bet? Qiu stared fixedly at Yi Xian. You really won't use these two swords? Yi Xian nodded. I absolutely won't. I swear to the heavens. Qiu remained silent for a moment, and then he gazed at Ling Yi. The latter hesitated for a moment before he opened his right hand, and a golden figure appeared there. Yi Xian's eyelids twitched when he witnessed this scene. Ling Yi has one as well. Qiu gazed at Yi Xian. I'll add one more. If you lose, then you have to compensate brother Ling Yi with a creation realm spear. Yi Xian nodded. All right. Which one of you will go first? Ling Yi was about to speak when Qiu spoke abruptly. I'll do it. I just happen to want to witness young Master Ye's true strength. As soon as he finished speaking, he opened his palm, and a black iron rod silently appeared there. The iron rod was completely pitch black, and it emanated a ghastly aura. The Dao realm. Yi Xian fell silent. He hadn't expected that Qiu would actually possess a Dao realm treasure. Could it be that Dao realm treasures are like cabbages in the divine kingdom? Meanwhile, Qiu waved the iron rod in his hand and smiled. City Governor Yi, prepare a few more swords. Because I'm afraid your swords won't be able to withstand my iron rod. Yi Xian spoke in a low voice. You don't allow me to use Dao realm swords, yet you use them yourself. Aren't you a little too shameless? Qiu spoke indifferently. Shameless? Didn't I learn that from you, young Master Yi? Let's fight. As soon as he finished speaking, he leaped forward. In the next moment, countless iron rod images covered the heavens and the earth as they enveloped Yi Xian. Right at this moment, the ground beneath Yi Xian's feet started to tremble violently. In the next moment, the energy of the earth surged towards Yi Xian like tidewater. Nangong Wan's beautiful brows knit together slightly when she witnessed this scene. Right at this moment, Yi Xian suddenly charged forward. He didn't utilize his sword, and he smashed his fist forward instead. Bang! The countless afterimages instantly vanished, whereas Qiu was blasted over 1 kilometer away. At this moment, the entire practice grounds had been overturned, and it was in a mess. He'd lost with a single punch. The energy of the earth. Yi Xian closed his eyes slowly, and he slowly relaxed his right hand. In next to no time, the energy of the earth returned to the ground. The energy of the earth was one of his trump cards. Especially now, he could instantly mobilize the energy of the earth and the earth veins in an area of almost 5,000 kilometers. If he was given some time, he could even gather the energy of the earth and the earth veins in an area of 50,000 kilometers. After he gathered so much energy of the earth and the earth veins, his strength would absolutely far exceed the Dao validation realm. It should be said that even a Dao mastery realm expert wouldn't be able to resist him, and only experts at the level of the Star Lord and the others would be able to resist his grand Dao law. Yi Xian looked towards the distance. At this moment, Qiu had already fallen on the earth veins. He was just about to stand up when Yi Xian suddenly appeared in front of him. Qiu's expression changed. Yi Xian didn't kill him, and Yi Xian had seized the black iron rod in Qiu's hand. Qiu's expression changed. You! He'd just spoken when a sword was suddenly pressed against his neck. Yi Xian looked at Qiu. You've lost. According to the agreement, we had a life and death duel just now. In other words, I can kill you. However, I, Yi Xian, am not a ruthless person. I can spare your life, but the battle with you just now took a huge toll on me. I want 5 million divine crystals as compensation. You don't have any objections, do you? Qiu stared at Yi Xian. Are you blackmailing me? Yi Xian nodded. It seems like you're not going to compensate me for my losses. As soon as he finished speaking, his sword slashed down. Chi! One of Qiu's arms flew off, and blood spurted out like a fountain. However, Qiu didn't even bat an eyelid. He just stared at Yi Xian. Yi Xian didn't waste any words, nor did he hesitate. He slashed his sword at Xueqi's head. At this moment, a spear suddenly pierced through the air. Clang! Yi Xian's sword was blocked by Ling Ye's spear. Meanwhile, the soldiers in the surroundings suddenly encircled them. Yi Xian glanced at them and grinned. Can't accept defeat? Right at this moment, Nan Gongwan spoke abruptly. Give 5 million divine crystals to young Master Yi. Xueqi's expression was slightly unsightly. He was just about to speak when Nan Gongwan glanced at him. Her gaze was very calm, but Xueqi's heart trembled. He didn't dare speak another word, and he immediately turned around and left. Nan Gongwan waved her right hand lightly, and it didn't take long for the soldiers in the surroundings to leave. Nan Gongwan walked over to Yi Xian, and then she returned the 2 golden figures to Yi Xian. After that she said, Young Master Yi, my divine kingdom is willing to bet, and I concede defeat. These are yours. Yi Xian didn't refuse, and he immediately put the 2 golden figures away. After that he said, Thank you, Miss Nan Gong. Nan Gongwan shook her head. You deserve it. Yi Xian was just about to speak when Xueqi walked over, and then he tapped with his left hand, causing a spatial ring to fly over to Yi Xian. There were exactly 5 million divine crystals within the spatial ring. Yi Xian put the 5 million divine crystals away, and then he gazed at Nan Gongwan. Miss Nan Gong, I've disturbed you for so long. It's time for me to leave. Nan Gongwan said, Young Master Yi is leaving just like that? Yi Xian nodded. Nan Gongwan nodded lightly. Young Master Yi, I want to take you to see my divine kingdom's army before I leave. Do you want to come with me? Yi Xian thought for a moment and said, All right. Nan Gongwan said, Come with me. She turned around and left once she finished speaking. Yi Xian hurriedly followed after her. Meanwhile, Nan Gongwan suddenly stopped moving, and she glanced at Xueqi who stood nearby. On many occasions, failure isn't terrifying. What's terrifying is giving up after failure. Don't think that young Master Yi is playing dirty with all of you. A true man is courageous after knowing shame. She turned around and left once she finished speaking. Xueqi hurriedly bowed to Nan Gongwan. Thank you, State Scholar Nan Gong. On the road not far away, Nan Gongwan said softly, I've underestimated young Master Yi. Yi Xian smiled. Miss Nan Gong is the one who's truly unfathomable. Up until now, he still couldn't sense Nan Gongwan's realm. Yu definitely knew, but he didn't dare disturb this fellow who was sleeping. This Yu's temper was too violent. It was best to keep a low profile before he could defeat him. Nan Gongwan smiled. Young Master Yi, are you interested in joining our divine kingdom? Join divine kingdom. Yi Xian shook his head. I'm not interested for now. He still couldn't figure out divine kingdom's true intentions. Join divine kingdom? He didn't dare, and he didn't want to. He just wanted divine martial city to be like before, where no one dared to bully him. But joining divine kingdom meant that he would have to lead the sword sex Wu Yuan to submit to divine kingdom. He definitely wouldn't do that. Nan Gongwan nodded and didn't say anything else. Soon, the 2 of them arrived at the peak of a mountain. Yi Xian looked down and saw 10,000 soldiers sitting cross-legged on the ground, cultivating. At this time, Nan Gongwan suddenly said, Brothers of the 9th Corps, greet City Lord Yi. The soldiers below suddenly raised their heads. In the next moment, all of them stood up and roared in unison. Greetings, City Lord Yi. Their voices were like thunder, shaking the sky and the mountains. At the same time, a powerful momentum suddenly soared up from below. This momentum instantly arrived in front of Yi Xian. Yi Xian waved his right hand and a sword momentum surged out. However, the moment the sword momentum appeared, it instantly collapsed. Bang! Yi Xian retreated violently in an instant. This time, he retreated as far as 10,000 feet. At this time, the 10,000 soldiers suddenly raised their spears and roared in unison. Kill! Bang! Countless fighting intents suddenly soared into the sky. In the end, they formed a giant blade that was thousands of feet long in the air. As the giant blade showed up, a strong killing intent shrouded Yi Xian, who was not far away. Being enveloped by the killing intent, Yi Xian's expression instantly became ferocious. In the next moment, the blood in his body started to tremble. P.S. It's a true story. 2 years ago, I borrowed a sum of money, and he still hasn't returned it to me. When I borrowed it, he said that he would return it next month. He didn't say a word next month. Not only that, he dragged it on for 2 years. Now that I urgently need money, I took the initiative to ask him for it, but he kept dragging it on. When you were in trouble, I helped you out. Now that I'm in trouble, you play tricks with me. As the saying goes, the one who owes money is the master. No, this is not the master. It's the ancestor. Now, because I asked him to return the money, our relationship as relatives has deteriorated. Let me give everyone a piece of advice. If you can avoid borrowing money, don't borrow money. Sometimes, it's really frustrating, especially when you ask the other party to return the money. Lending money to you is for you to turn over a new leaf, not for you to turn against them. Cherish those who are willing to lend money to you because they trust you. Don't let them down. Is there any reader who has a similar experience as me? Chapter 609. Gradually, a red glow appeared around Yi Xian. At the same time, a murderous intent slowly spread out from his body. Nan Gongwan looked at Yi Xian calmly. At this moment, the giant blade in the air suddenly slashed towards Yi Xian in the distance. Yi Xian's expression turned sinister. In the next moment, he held the all-heaven sword with both hands and slashed down. Chi! With a slash of the sword, the giant blade was instantly shattered. It was so easy that all the soldiers below were stunned. Yi Xian closed his eyes and held the executing heaven sword tightly in his right hand. Suppress! At this moment, he was actively suppressing the bloodline in his body. He didn't want to be controlled by this bloodline. Nan Gongwan looked at Yi Xian. Young Master Yi, our god nation has 9 such legions. Above them, there are 3 paladin legions. There aren't many of them, and each of them has only 1,000 people. However, they are all peak creation realm experts, and each of them has the strength to fight against Dao realm experts. Above the paladin legions, there are His Majesty's personal guards. There are only 1,000 people, but they are all Dao realm experts. Above them are the divine martial army and the dark guards. I don't know how strong these people are. Apart from them, our god nation has 36 sections. These 36 sects have their own Dao soldiers. There are also some ancient families with their own elites. I don't know how strong these elites are. Speaking of this, she smiled and said, these are not our god nation's strongest troops. Our god nation's strongest troops are the god nation's guardians. Their numbers are unknown, and their strength is unknown. However, I can tell young Master Yi that with your current strength, you are not qualified to join the god nation's guardians. Young Master Yi, what are you going to use to fight us? Especially you. If you don't surrender now, it will be different when our god nation's sword hangs over divine martial city in the future. As Nan Gongwan's voice fell, 10 men in black suddenly appeared around Yi Xian. Yi Xian forcefully suppressed the killing intent in his mind and said softly, we were just talking nicely. Why do you want to make a move? Nan Gongwan smiled and said, young Master Yi, I hope you don't get angry. Your talent is not bad, but there are many people in Scandinavia who are more outstanding than you. Therefore, you can leave. However, we want the pagoda in your body. Yi Xian looked at Nan Gongwan. What if I don't give it to you? Nan Gongwan made an inviting gesture. Then let's invite young Master Yi to begin your performance. I'll watch. Yi Xian suddenly disappeared. A wisp of blood-red sword energy suddenly pierced through Nan Gongwan's forehead. However, Yi Xian's face sank. Because the sword had only pierced through an afterimage, Nan Gongwan was already 1,000 feet away, and she still had a faint smile on her face. Yi Xian didn't waste any time. A spatial stone suddenly appeared in his palm and he vanished into thin air. Nan Gongwan's eyes narrowed slightly. Spatial teleportation stone. As she spoke, she raised her head and looked towards the sky. Space seal. As soon as she finished speaking, the space in the distant horizon started to tremble violently, and it didn't take long for strands of mysterious energy to appear incessantly in that space. Yi Xian suddenly noticed that the space in front of him was actually covered in layers of obstructions. His expression instantly changed, and then he hurriedly circulated the spatial Dao laws. In next to no time, countless strands of spatial energy appeared in the surroundings, and then the mysterious energy was directly shattered by this spatial energy. Space loosened, and Yi Xian relied on the spatial Tao laws to directly teleport through space. In the blink of an eye, he'd arrived at God Burial Plains. A certain space in the sky above God Burial Plains suddenly split open, and then Yi Xian flew out from within it. In the next moment, he shot straight towards the Great Wall. Right at this moment, an enormous hand suddenly appeared in the sky behind him. In the next moment, the enormous hand carried a destructive force as it smashed down towards him. The powerful force caused the space in the surroundings to start cracking apart. The enormous hand descended extremely quickly, and it arrived above Yi Xian in the blink of an eye. Yi Xian turned around. He drew his sword and slashed. All Heaven's sword. The enormous hand was instantly slashed apart as soon as his sword descended, but Yi Xian himself was instantly blasted over 10 kilometers away. Yi Xian had just descended to the ground when his figure shook, and he was within the Great Wall when his figure appeared once more. As soon as Yi Xian turned around, the distant sky had returned to normal. Meanwhile, some experts appeared by Yi Xian's side, and all of them were experts from the various desolate worlds. Blood flowed from the corners of Yi Xian's mouth. At this moment, all his internal organs had been blasted apart. Isn't that Yi Xian? What happened to him? It looks like he was beaten up by the members of the divine nation. Humph. Isn't he very strong? How did he get beaten up like this as soon as he arrived in the divine nation? Yi Xian paid no attention to them. He just sat cross-legged on the ground and started to devour divine crystals and spirit fruits. About half an hour later, Yi Xian's injuries were mostly healed. He stood up and walked toward the Sky Trampling Hall. Soon, Yi Xian arrived at the Sky Trampling Hall, where the Astral Lord and the others were already present. Apart from the Astral Lord and the others, there were two others, Commander Chu and a middle-aged man in armor. Everyone was looking at Yi Xian. Yi Xian waved his right hand and Gu Taishan's corpse appeared in front of the Astral Lord. Seeing Gu Taishan's corpse, the Astral Lord's expression changed slightly. He glanced at Yi Xian and quickly put away Gu Taishan's corpse. At this time, Perfected Master Chu said, "Little friend Yi, did you find out anything about the divine nation?" Yi Xian nodded. "A little," Perfected Master Chu said. "How strong are they?" Yi Xian said in a low voice, "Much, much stronger than we imagined." As he spoke, he told them about the army that Nangong Wan had told him about. After listening to Yi Xian, the hall suddenly fell silent. If it was really as Yi Xian said, then the divine nation's strength was extraordinary. Meanwhile, the armored man suddenly said, "City Governor Yi, how did you find out about something as confidential as the divine nation?" Everyone looked at Yi Xian. Yi Xian thought for a moment and said, "Do you think I'm lying to you?" The armored man shook his head. "I'm just thinking, how did young Master Yi know about something as confidential as the divine nation in such detail?" Yi Xian said, "I naturally have my ways." He naturally wouldn't say that Nangong Wan told him because if he did, these people would definitely think that he was colluding with the divine nation. The armored man smiled. "City Governor Yi, the divine nation might be very strong, but it's definitely not as strong as you say." Yi Xian looked at the armored man. "You are." The armored man smiled. "Li Qian, one of the deputy commanders of the divine army." Yi Xian said, "If Commander Li doesn't believe me, you can send someone else to the divine nation to investigate." Li Qian looked at Yi Xian. "City Governor Yi, you better explain how you know so much about the divine nation's secrets." Yi Xian smiled. "Commander Li, I really won't say." "Bite me?" Li Qian's eyes narrowed slightly, and a powerful aura suddenly crushed towards Yi Xian. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly charged forward and slashed down with his sword. Hiss! That aura was instantly slashed apart. Li Qian suddenly stabbed forward with his spear. Hiss! Li Qian's spear was directly slashed apart by Yi Xian's sword. At this moment, a powerful force suddenly pushed Yi Xian and Li Qian back. Both of them returned to their original positions at the same time. The one who attacked was Perfected Chu. Perfected Chu looked at the two of them. Now is not the time for internal strife. Then, he looked at Yi Xian. "Little friend Yi, how did you know about the divine nation's secrets?" "Did you know about the divine nation's secrets?" Yi Xian was silent for a moment, then said, "A kingdom knight told me." Perfected Chu asked, "The divine nation didn't capture you? They even told you?" Yi Xian nodded. Seeing Yi Xian nod, Li Qian immediately sneered. The expressions of everyone present also became strange. Yi Xian shook his head. It was not easy to tell the truth, but no one believed him. What kind of world was this? Beside him, Tang Yen said solemnly, "Little friend Yi, can you tell us why they not only didn't capture you, but also told you so many secrets?" Yi Xian spread his hands. "It seems that everyone doesn't believe me." Tang Yen shook his head. "It's not that we don't believe you, but this is really strange." At this moment, Xueqi suddenly said, "This must be a conspiracy by the divine nation." Everyone looked at Xueqi. Xueqi said solemnly, "If they're really that strong, why haven't they made a move? There's only one explanation. They're not as strong as we expected. In fact, they're weak. Moreover, they told City Lord Yi these things to scare us and affect our morale, so that we won't dare to attack them." Li Qian nodded slightly. "That makes sense. If they're really as strong as some people say, they would have already sent an army to attack us. But now, there's no movement at all. There's only one explanation, and that's that they're using our power to intimidate us." At this point, he glanced at Yi Xian and said, "And the reason they let City Lord Yi come back is probably to use him to affect our morale. I suggest that we organize an attack and take the initiative to attack the divine nation." Take the initiative to attack the divine nation. Yi Xian was silent. Beside him, the southern faction martial master shook his head. "Taking the initiative to attack is too risky." Li Qian said, "Senior martial master, we must fight." The southern faction martial master asked, "Why?" Li Qian said solemnly, "Because there are too many powerhouses from all over the wasteland world who want to fight. These people all want to kill their way into the divine nation. If we continue to suppress them, it may cause the opposite effect and wear down their morale and fighting spirit." The southern faction martial master frowned slightly. "They want to fight so badly? This is because..." At this point he paused and then said, "Greed. Greed. What was the purpose of these powerhouses from all over the wasteland world? To protect the three wastelands? Not exactly. Their main purpose was to enter the divine nation. A brand new nation meant unlimited wealth. Many people were thirsting for it." At this moment, Li Qian, who was at the side, suddenly looked at Yi Xian. The divine nation not only told Lord Yi so many so-called secrets, but also let Lord Yi come back. For the sake of safety, I suggest that from now on, Lord Yi, until we return in triumph, you are not allowed to take even half a step out of the sky-stepping palace." Yi Xian was still silent. At this time the Astral Master suddenly said, "The divine nation even let go of ancient Astral Lord's corpse. Obviously, they are not as strong as we thought. Let's launch an attack. As the saying goes, the first to strike has the upper hand. If they don't do it, then we will." As he said this, he glanced at Yi Xian. To avoid unnecessary trouble, City Lord Yi should temporarily stay in the heaven-stepping hall for this period of time. At this time, Spiritual Master Chu looked at Yi Xian. "Do you have anything to say?" Yi Xian was silent for a moment and then said, "As Commander Li, Commander Chu, and the Astral Master said, the divine nation may not be as strong as we thought. They might even be a fox pretending to be a tiger. So, since the seniors want to attack the divine nation, then attack. I will listen to you. Attack." Spiritual Master Chu glanced at Yi Xian and then looked at the Astral Master. "Organize a group of powerhouses and launch a surprise attack." The Astral Master nodded. Surprise attack the divine nation. Chapter 6:10. After Spiritual Master Chu and the others made their decision, they left the sky trampling hall. Only Yi Xian and the Southern Sect martial artist were left in the hall. Yi Xian sat on a chair, his face expressionless. Greed. Sometimes, greed would devour one's reason. Attack the divine nation? He suddenly realized that in this chaotic chaos-verse, there were many times when there was no right or wrong. Before coming, Spiritual Master Chu had told him that defending the divine nation was for the sake of the world. However, it was all bullshit. These people from various desolate worlds had come here for him. The divine nation wanted to conquer them, and they wanted to conquer the divine nation. Who was right and who was wrong? It was all the same. Everyone in the hall felt that the divine nation was not that powerful, but he knew that Nan Gongwan had no reason to lie to him. Moreover, the divine nation might be even more powerful than Nan Gongwan said. However, he did not want to care. He had come here to defend the divine nation with these people and protect Shenwu City. Now, it seemed that he was wrong. These people had come for him, and once they entered the divine nation, they would definitely become demons. Sometimes, human nature could be so dark that one could not recognize oneself. Yi Xian was about to get up and leave when the Southern Sect martial master nearby suddenly said, "I believe what you said earlier." Yi Xian looked at the Southern Sect martial artist. He had stayed behind to watch him, obviously afraid that he would inform the divine nation. Thinking of this, Yi Xian could not help but laugh at himself. At this time, the Southern Sect martial artist said, "They will definitely fail." Yi Xian looked at the Southern Sect martial artist. "Then why didn't you stop them?" The Southern Sect martial artist smiled. "How? There are hundreds of thousands of people here, and in their eyes, the divine nation is a big fat sheep that everyone wants." Yi Xian said, "Ordinary people might not understand, but can the planet lord and spiritual master Chu not understand?" The Southern Sect martial artist shook his head. "They are greedier. Moreover, they need someone to use their life to test the divine nation's strength." Hearing this, Yi Xian immediately understood. The Southern Sect's martial arts master suddenly said, "Young friend Yi, the old man has a presumptuous request." Yi Xian looked at the Southern Sect's martial arts master. "Senior, please speak." The Southern Sect martial master said, "That disciple of mine is stubborn and doesn't know how to be flexible. If there are any changes in the future, I hope City Lord Yi can take care of him." With that, he flicked his finger, and a storage ring landed in front of Yi Xian. There was a Dao realm treasure inside the storage ring. The Southern Sect's martial arts master smiled and said, "This is my only Dao realm treasure." That girl doesn't like it, so young Master Yi, please don't look down on it. Yi Xian flicked his finger and flicked the storage ring back to the Southern Sect martial master. The Southern Sect martial master looked at Yi Xian and waited for him to continue. Yi Xian said softly, "Senior has spoken up for me several times before. I have always remembered this favor in my heart. I can't guarantee anything else, but if Miss Zhao is in danger in the future, I will do my best to help her." Although Yi Xian liked treasures, he did have a bottom line. He had never forgotten someone who had helped him before. The Southern Sect's martial arts master glanced at Yi Xian and smiled. "Young friend Yi, now I understand why Wu Wen and Yu Wuchen handed the sword sect and Wu Yuan to you." Yi Xian suddenly asked, "Senior, do you have any relationship with Wu Yuan?" The Southern Sect's martial arts master smiled and said, "A little. My master left Wu Yuan in the past. However, he was expelled, so he is not considered a member of Wu Yuan." Hearing this, Yi Xian suddenly understood. No wonder the Southern Sect's martial arts master spoke up for him several times before. It might be because of this. Meanwhile, the Southern Sect's martial arts master suddenly stood up, walked to the entrance of the hall, and looked in the direction of the God Burial Plains. He said softly, "They will be here soon." Yi Xian stood up, walked to the entrance of the hall, and looked in the direction of the God Burial Plains as well. The God Burial Plains. There weren't many people attacking the God Burial Plains this time. Only 100. However, all of them had been carefully selected. Amongst them, there were 10 Dao Validation Realm experts, 30 Dao Realm experts, and the weakest amongst them was at the Saint Realm. This lineup could be said to be very strong. Moreover, the person in the lead was Li Qian. This time their target was the Earthen Stronghold. The Earthen Stronghold was one of the strongholds of the God Burial Plains. The Star-Lord and the other three were waiting in battle formation in midair. So long as the top-rate experts of the God Burial Plains attacked, they would stop them. Below them, Li Qian, who was in the lead, looked at the Earthen Stronghold that had appeared in the distance, and his expression became slightly ferocious. "Everyone, the Star-Lord has ordered that you can take anything within the God Burial Plains after you enter the God Burial Plains." Everyone instantly felt as if they'd been injected with stimulants, and their blood boiled. What did they come here for? Naturally, it was for benefits. To protect the common people of the world? No. Most of the time, the more powerful a person was, the more selfish they were because they only lived for themselves. The God Burial Plains was an unknown country, and it was hostile to the three desolate worlds. Once the god burial plains were destroyed, then all the wealth within the god burial plains would belong to them. Great rewards were bound to attract brave men. It didn't take long for the group to arrive before the earthen stronghold. At this moment, the gates of the stronghold suddenly opened, and a man with a spear stood before the gates. The man looked at Li Qian and the others who were charging at him with an expressionless face. Li Qian's expression was ferocious. Kill! As soon as he spoke, he leaped up and charged directly towards the man with the spear. However, at the instant he charged out, shrill cries suddenly resounded from behind him. Li Qian's expression changed drastically. He turned around, and behind him, 100 people fell one by one. After 10 breaths of time, there were 100 more corpses on the ground in front of him. Moreover, it was 20 men in black who had attacked him with sickles in their hands. These 20 people stood there silently like gods of death. Li Qian's mind went blank. Were they all gone just like that? In the void, the expressions of the Star Lord and the others also became extremely solemn. This was an instant kill. Were the 20 people below the god burial plains most elite soldiers? Below, the man with the spear slowly walked towards Li Qian. Li Qian came to his senses and looked at the man with the spear. You guys were prepared. Did Yi Xian inform you? The man with the spear did not reply to Li Qian. He suddenly charged forward, and a powerful force shot directly towards Li Qian. Li Qian's expression turned ferocious as he charged forward and punched out. Boom! Almost instantly, both of them retreated at the same time. As the deputy commander of the Divine Lord, Li Qian's strength was naturally unquestionable. After Li Qian stopped, he turned and ran. The men in black wanted to give chase, but the man with the spear shook his head. No need. As he spoke, he glanced at the corpses on the ground. Send the heads of these people to the foot of the Great Wall. Yes, Commander Yu. Soon, 100 bloody heads were piled up at the foot of the Great Wall. After Li Qian returned to the Great Wall, he looked at the myriad mountain hall and roared, Yi Xian, get out here. A flying sword suddenly flew out from the myriad mountain hall. The next moment, boom! Li Qian was directly pushed back 100 feet by this sword. At the same time, one of his arms flew off. This was because this flying sword was the executing heaven sword. At this moment, Yi Xian appeared in front of Li Qian. He walked towards Li Qian, the executing heaven sword hovering above his head. Li Qian looked at Yi Xian in shock and anger. Yi Xian, did you betray us? Yi Xian shook his head. You're so stupid. How did you become the commander of the Divine Lord? Li Qian glared at Yi Xian angrily. Where is the Divine Lord? As soon as his voice fell, a dozen experts in golden armor suddenly appeared around Yi Xian. Every one of them was a Dao validation expert, and their auras were extremely powerful. Li Qian said angrily, Yi Xian, the divine race was clearly prepared. If you hadn't tipped them off, how could they have known that we were going to attack them? Our 100 experts were all slaughtered. Yi Xian, doesn't your conscience hurt? The moment this was said, there was an uproar. This Yi Xian colluded with the divine nation? For a moment, all the experts present looked at Yi Xian with unfriendly expressions. Yi Xian said in a deep voice, Commander Li, why did you come back alive when all 100 experts died? Li Qian said angrily, I escaped. Yi Xian said seriously, the divine nation actually let you escape. It seems like your relationship with the divine nation isn't ordinary. Li Qian suddenly pointed at Yi Xian angrily. Kill him. As soon as he said that, the divine Dao soldiers were about to attack. At this moment, the southern sect martial master appeared in front of Yi Xian. He glanced at Li Qian. He was with me the whole time and didn't tip off. Li Qian said in a deep voice, Martial master, there's no one else but him. It must be him. The southern sect martial master suddenly waved his right hand. Boom! A powerful force suddenly enveloped Li Qian. In an instant, Li Qian's legs bent and he knelt down. Li Qian looked at the southern sect martial master in disbelief. The latter said indifferently, Are you going to say that I colluded with the divine nation? Li Qian didn't dare to speak. He only looked at Yi Xian with resentment. At this moment, the Star Lord, Perfected Chu, and the others appeared. Perfected Chu glanced at Yi Xian and Li Qian. Then he said, There's something fishy about this. As he said that, he looked at Yi Xian. Little friend Yi, you went to the divine nation and they found you. Not only did they not capture you, but they also told you so many secrets of the divine nation. You have to explain this. Yi Xian smiled. How can I explain? You wouldn't believe me anyway, would you? Perfected Chu's face instantly darkened. At this moment the Star Lord suddenly said, City Lord Yi, this concerns the lives of countless people. If you don't explain, don't blame us for being impolite. What's there to explain? Not far away, Li Qian, who was still kneeling, suddenly said angrily, This person must have colluded with the divine nation. If we let him live, he will definitely stab us in the back when we fight with the divine nation in the future. This person must. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly slashed with his sword. Chi! Li Qian's head instantly flew out. Because Li Qian and Yi Xian were too close, and no one expected Yi Xian to suddenly kill someone, the Star Lord and the others didn't have time to stop him. Yi Xian put away his sword and looked at Li Qian's head that was rolling on the ground. In your next life, you must remember the reason for this life's death. Talking too much. Li Qian was speechless. Chapter 6:11. If someone were to slander you, you had two choices. First, find evidence, argue with him, and prove your innocence. If he still did not believe you, he would still slander you. The second option, make him shut up forever. That way, he can't slander you anymore. Yi Xian chose the first one. But the other party did not believe him. Thus, he chose the second one. Now, it was no longer important whether the other party believed him or not. Everyone was looking at Yi Xian. They did not expect that Yi Xian would suddenly kill someone, and the person he killed was a deputy commander of the Divine Dao soldiers. Not only that, Yi Xian used one sword soul fixation, so Li Qian's soul was killed by him. It could be said that Li Qian had completely disappeared from this time. Not far away, the planet lord stared at Yi Xian. Do you really think that no one in this world can deal with you? Yi Xian did not care about the planet lord, but looked at Perfected Chu. Perfected Chu, let's reason things out. Hearing this, everyone's expressions suddenly became strange. Reason things out after killing someone? Why not go to the heavens? At the side, the planet lord was so angry that he laughed. Yi Xian, oh Yi Xian, do you think that everyone in this world is stupid? As he spoke, he was about to make a move. At this moment, Perfected Chu suddenly said, Let him reason things out. The planet lord looked at Perfected Chu, and Perfected Chu said indifferently, He is only at the law-controlling realm, but what about you, planet lord? Is it glory to win? Status. The planet lord was silent. His current status was that of the planet lord. If he fought with Yi Xian alone, it would be extremely disadvantageous to him. But to Yi Xian it was advantageous, extremely advantageous. Thinking of this, the planet lord looked coldly at Yi Xian, and no longer spoke. Perfected Chu looked at Yi Xian. Didn't you want to reason things out? Say it. Yi Xian said. Perfected Chu, did I say anything about God Nation's strength when I came back? Perfected Chu nodded. Yi Xian said, But Commander Li Qian, Commander Chu Kuang, and the Celestial Lord don't believe me. The three of them said that the Celestial race is using the Celestial race's name to intimidate us. Are they the ones who said this? Perfected Chu was silent. Yi Xian continued, I risked my life to gather information, but what did I get in return? It was their suspicions, saying that I colluded with the divine nations. If I really colluded with God Nation, why would I come back? At this point, he looked at the Celestial Lord. Celestial Lord, I told you that Scandinavia is strong, but you said that I affected the morale of the army. If I said that Scandinavia is very weak, would you say that I'm numbing you, making you look down on Scandinavia? The Star Lord stared at Yi Xian. What we are discussing now is why God Nation let you go. Yi Xian laughed, then took out the space stone. I used this to escape. Is there a problem? The Star Lord asked again. Why did they tell you so many secrets? Yi Xian said, It was a woman called Nan Gongwan who told me. She seems to be a kingdom knight in Scandinavia. You are so powerful. Why don't you ask her? Ask her why she told me so many secrets. The Star Lord was expressionless. You don't want to say? Yi Xian laughed. Star Lord, look at you. I asked you and your Order Alliance to go to Scandinavia, but you didn't dare to go. I went, But when I came back, you didn't believe me. Are you trying to be cheap? The Star Lord suddenly disappeared. Not far away, the southern sex martial artist was about to make a move, but Perfected Chu's voice suddenly sounded in his mind. This kid is too arrogant. Let the Star Lord suppress his arrogance, or else he won't be easy to make use of. The southern sex martial artist hesitated, but at this moment, Yi Xian was suddenly sent flying. He flew for hundreds of feet. Just as Yi Xian stopped, the Star Lord suddenly punched through the air. Boom! The space in front of Yi Xian instantly exploded, and a powerful force blasted towards Yi Xian. Yi Xian's expression turned sinister as he drew his sword and slashed. Chi! As the sword slashed down, the force was directly shattered by the sword. However, Yi Xian was still sent flying again. Because that force was too strong. Hundreds of feet away, the moment Yi Xian landed on the ground beneath him directly cracked. At this moment, a monstrous pressure pressed down on Yi Xian like a mountain. Boom! The ground around Yi Xian instantly exploded. At the same time, Yi Xian's legs directly bent, and he almost knelt down. Not far away, the Star Lord was about to make another move, but at this moment, a figure suddenly shot towards the Star Lord. The one who made a move was Mo Xie. The Star Lord coldly looked at Mo Xie and flicked his sleeves. Boom! Mo Xie's entire body was instantly blasted hundreds of feet away. In the air, he continuously spat out blood. It was incomparably shocking. The Star Lord didn't care about Mo Xie. He looked at the nearby Yi Xian, and that pressure was still shrouding Yi Xian. Yi Xian's right foot fiercely stomped, the ground trembled, and a powerful sword aura suddenly rushed up. However, as the Star Lord lightly pressed down with his right hand, that sword aura instantly disappeared without a trace. The Star Lord slowly walked towards Yi Xian. With every step he took, the pressure above Yi Xian's head would become a little stronger. The Star Lord looked at Yi Xian. Yi Xian, you have backbone and guts, but what use is that? Without strength, the so-called backbone and guts are nothing but a joke. Now, if you are willing to kneel down, I can spare your life. Kneel down. These words struck the heart. If a swordsman knelt down, would he still be a swordsman? This Star Lord wanted to directly break Yi Xian's mental state. Not far away, Yi Xian sneered. Star Lord, have you eaten too much tea? As his voice faded, he suddenly held his sword with both hands and slashed forward. Chi! With one slash, the pressure above his head was instantly cut open. However, in the next moment, that pressure gathered again, and it was much stronger than before. The Star Lord once again took a step forward. Kneel down! As his voice faded, a powerful pressure suddenly swept out from his body. Very quickly, this pressure directly reached Yi Xian's body. Kacha! At this moment, the bones in Yi Xian's body immediately made a kacha sound. At the same time, Yi Xian's legs became more and more bent. The Star Lord didn't directly kill Yi Xian, because he felt that directly killing Yi Xian would be too easy on Yi Xian. If he made Yi Xian kneel down in front of everyone, a proud person like Yi Xian would definitely be in great pain. Thinking of this, an inexplicable smile appeared on the Star Lord's face. At this moment, a figure suddenly shot towards the Star Lord. The one who attacked was still Mo Xie. At this moment, Mo Xie's body emitted a powerful bloodline power. Obviously, he had also used his trump card. The Star Lord stopped and looked at Mo Xie. In the next moment, his right hand lightly pressed forward. Boom! A powerful force forced Mo Xie to stop. In the next moment, the Star Lord's left hand flew through the air. A punch blasted out. Boom! The space around Mo Xie violently trembled. Immediately, Mo Xie spat out a mouthful of blood, and his entire body flew out. His entire body heavily smashed onto the ground, as if his entire body had fallen apart. Mo Xie looked at the sky, blood continuously flowing out of his mouth. The Star Lord looked at Yi Xian. In the next moment, his right hand lightly lifted up and then pressed down. Boom! The place where Yi Xian was directly collapsed, but Yi Xian was still standing. Even though blood was gushing out of the corner of his mouth like a fountain, he still didn't kneel down. Not far away, the southern sex martial artist looked at Perfected Chu. Is that enough? Perfected Chu was expressionless. If this person doesn't put away his pride, how can he become the sword in our hands? The southern sex martial artist was about to speak, but at this moment Perfected Chu said, Brother Wu, just watch carefully. Don't let an outsider affect our friendship. As he spoke, he looked not far away. At this moment, the Star Lord was already 20 feet away from Yi Xian, and a powerful pressure was continuously crushing towards Yi Xian. A space Dao Law suddenly appeared between Yi Xian's eyebrows. In the next moment, the space in front of him began to shrink layer by layer, and then formed a thick spatial barrier. The Star Lord was expressionless. He raised his hand and slapped. Boom! The space around Yi Xian instantly collapsed. In an instant, Yi Xian was in a pitch-black spatial black hole, and the pressure was still pressing down on Yi Xian. Moreover, it was even stronger than before. Yi Xian gritted his teeth tightly, and blood was still flowing out of the corner of his mouth. The Star Lord looked coldly at Yi Xian. He was about to attack again, but at this moment, Mo Xie suddenly stood up. In the next moment, he suddenly put his hands together, and then he pointed at the distant Star Lord through the air. Break through! As soon as he spoke, the space in front of the Star Lord exploded like a volcanic eruption, and a powerful force instantly drowned the Star Lord. At this moment, the sound of a sword suddenly resounded in the distance, and soon, numerous flying swords directly slashed towards the Star Lord. At this moment, a powerful force suddenly erupted from where the Star Lord stood, and in an instant, the space within a radius of tens of thousands of feet shook violently. Boom! Yi Xian's flying swords instantly disappeared, and at this moment, a powerful force suddenly flashed across the field. Not far away, Mo Xie's pupils shrank, and his arms abruptly blocked in front of him. Boom! A powerful force swept over, and Mo Xie was instantly blasted away. Just as he landed on the ground, both his arms were instantly shattered. At the same time, he directly spat out a mouthful of blood. Mo Xie looked at the horizon, and fresh blood flowed out of his mouth like spring water. This time, he really couldn't stand up. The Star Lord coldly glanced at Mo Xie, and then looked at Yi Xian. Yi Xian, are you going to kneel or not? Kneel? Yi Xian suddenly laughed sinisterly. In the next moment, all the blood in his body began to boil, and at the same time, the executing heaven sword in his hand began to violently tremble. Seeing this scene, the Star Lord instantly narrowed his eyes. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly raised his head and looked at the distant Star Lord. At this moment his eyes were blood red, and his expression was incomparably sinister. I, Yi Xian, have walked from Qingqing until now. I've been shameless, I've cried for my sister, but I've never been afraid. If my head falls off, it'll just be a bowl-sized scar. Kill me. Come on. As his voice fell, boom! A powerful aura suddenly swept out from Yi Xian's body. Under everyone's gaze, Yi Xian's entire body began to violently tremble. Seeing this scene, everyone's expression instantly changed. Self-destruct. Yi Xian was going to self-destruct. And at the moment he chose to self-destruct, his sword intent suddenly soared into the sky. This sword intent directly shattered the Star Lord's aura. Transcendent Sword Saint. However, it was too late. Yi Xian's body began to burn. At this moment, in an unknown starry sky, a woman in a plain dress suddenly stopped. In the next moment, her calm expression suddenly changed, and there was a trace of panic in her sinister expression. No! As her voice fell, thousands of sword auras suddenly appeared in this starry sky. In an instant, the entire starry sky was directly annihilated and shattered. P.S. Is there a female tycoon or someone who knows a female tycoon who wants to provide for someone? I'm tired of typing every day. I don't want to struggle anymore. I know all 36 yin-yang skills. Life is too difficult, I want to change it. I want to heroically say the words that have been hidden in my heart for a long time. I, Luan, don't need monthly votes. Is there anyone? If not, I'll ask again tomorrow. Chapter 6:12. Life and Death? Yi Xian naturally wanted to live. However, he would not choose to live in humiliation. If someone wanted him to be a dog, he would rather die than obey. Self-destruct. If he could not live well, then he would choose to die a glorious death. Yi Xian's choice to self-destruct shocked everyone present, including the Astral Lord. He did not expect Yi Xian to choose to self-destruct. Was he really not afraid of death? The Astral Lord stared at Yi Xian, whose aura was rising rapidly. At this moment, his eyes were filled with killing intent. A person like Yi Xian was too terrifying. He must die. That was what he was thinking now. Fortunately, Yi Xian was about to die. Just as the powerful force in Yi Xian's body was about to explode, a hand suddenly pressed on Yi Xian's shoulder. In the next moment, the powerful and violent aura in Yi Xian's body was directly suppressed. The one who made a move was the Southern Sect's martial master. In the end, he still chose to make a move. Perfected Master Chu, the Astral Lord, and the Monster King all looked at the Southern Sect's martial master. The latter said softly, "Too much." As his voice fell, his right hand once again gently pressed down on Yi Xian's forehead. Soon, the blood in Yi Xian's body gradually calmed down. Seeing this scene, Perfected Master Chu and the Astral Lord's expressions changed slightly. Especially Perfected Master Chu, he had suppressed Yi Xian's bloodline power. However, at that time, he could not do it alone and had to rely on Tang Yan's help to suppress it. But now, the Southern Sect's martial master actually suppressed Yi Xian's bloodline power by himself. This strength, Perfected Master Chu took a deep look at the Southern Sect's martial master. There was a trace of wariness in the depths of his eyes. The Southern Sect's martial master ignored the people around him and said, "Leave these two to me." After saying that, he directly left with Yi Xian and Mo Xia. Not far away, the Astral Lord said in a deep voice, "Yi Xian can't be left alive." Tang Yan suddenly said, "It's best if we don't have any internal strife right now." Saying that, he glanced at the Star Lord and Perfected Chu. "The two of you don't forget, we still have an even greater enemy." With that, he turned around and left. The Monster King nodded as well. "What we need to do now is to fight against the Divine Nation. This Divine Nation is much stronger than we imagined. So, I suggest that more experts come here and fight against the Divine Nation with us." Taoist Chu nodded slightly. "Yes. Of course, I also hope that Brother Demon King can bring more experts from the demon race here." The Demon King nodded. "Sure." Perfected Master Chu nodded. Without saying anything else, he turned around and left. On the spot, the Star Lord was expressionless. Extraordinary Sword Saint. In that instant, Yi Xian actually broke through and became a transcendent Sword Saint. If Yi Xian's realm was a little higher and he was also a transcendent Sword Saint, he might not be able to do anything to him. In the same place, the Star Lord remained silent for a long time before finally turning around and leaving. On a certain mountain, Yi Xian and Mo Xia lay quietly on the ground. In front of them were the Southern Sect's martial master and Zhao Mu. From time to time, Zhao Mu would look at Yi Xian with an unfriendly expression. At this moment, the Southern Sect's martial master suddenly said, "Girl, go to the heaven-treading peak and get some elixirs for them. Tell them that I asked you to go." He could not leave Yi Xian and Mo Xia now because once he left, these two little fellows might lose their lives. Zhao Mu glanced at Yi Xian before turning around and leaving. After Zhao Mu left, Tang Yan suddenly appeared. He glanced at the Southern Sect's martial master. He smiled and said, "Brother Wu, you have offended the Star Lord and Perfected Chu." The Southern Sect's martial master said softly, "They have indeed gone too far." Speaking of this, he looked at Tang Yan. "You should know that this little fellow did not lie before. The divine race is much stronger than we imagined." Tang Yan said softly, "The Star Lord is afraid." As he spoke, he looked at Yi Xian. "He is so young but his strength is so strong. The Star Lord is afraid that he will continue to grow. If he continues to grow, in a few years at most, even us old fellows will not be able to do anything to him. And at that time, with this little fellow's personality, he will definitely not let the Order Alliance off. In fact, if it was him, he would also be afraid." Yi Xian's growth was too fast. At this moment, Xiao Linger suddenly appeared beside Yi Xian. The Southern Sect's martial master and Tang Yan's gaze immediately fell on Xiao Linger. Xiao Linger looked at the two of them warily. Then, under their shocked gazes, she directly brought the unconscious Yi Xian into the prison pagoda. But very quickly, she appeared in front of the two old men again. In her arms, she carried a large pile of spirit fruits. She placed the spirit fruits in front of the two of them and pointed at Mo Xia, who was lying on the ground not far away. Then, she turned around and disappeared. The two of them. A moment later, Tang Yan suddenly said, Brother Martial Master, are you not tempted by that treasure? The Southern Sex Martial Master smiled and said, Brother Tang, what did you rely on to cultivate to this level? Tang Yen was silent. The Southern Sex Martial Master said again, treasures and whatnot are naturally important. But if the focus is completely on treasures, then it is a bit like putting the cart before the horse. Tang Yen said softly, Brother Martial Master's mentality. I am not as good as you. The Southern Sex Martial Master turned to look at the far end and said softly, Brother Tang Yen, has your Tang family's iron cavalry arrived? Tang Yen nodded. Against God Nation, how would we dare to underestimate them? Not only our Tang family, but the Order Alliance and the Demon Race have also sent out their elites. This time if we win. At this point, he did not continue. Not far away, the Southern Sex Martial Master sighed softly and did not say anything in the end. At this moment, Tang Yen said again, Brother Martial Master, this Yi Xian is an unstable factor. If you do not give them a good explanation, I am afraid it will not do. The Southern Sex Martial Master said softly, I will handle his matter. Tang Yen nodded and did not say anything else. He turned around and left. Prison Pagoda. Yi Xian was lying on the ground and Xiao Linger was feeding him spirit fruits. After eating more than 10 spirit fruits, Yi Xian's pale face gradually improved. Seeing this, Xiao Linger was overjoyed and quickly fed Yi Xian a few more spirit fruits. About half an hour later, Yi Xian's consciousness recovered a little and he slowly opened his eyes. Xiao Linger quickly sat beside Yi Xian's head and blinked. You are awake? Yi Xian smiled. Yes. All right, where is my brother? Xiao Linger said. He is outside. But I gave him a lot of spirit fruits. Yi Xian slowly sat up and gently rubbed Xiao Linger. Thank you. With that, he was about to leave the prison pagoda. At this time, Xiao Linger suddenly pulled his sleeve. Yi Xian turned to look at Xiao Linger. Xiao Linger looked at him and softly said, You will be fine, okay? I'm afraid. Afraid. From Qingzhou until now, unknowingly, she had already regarded Yi Xian as the closest person to her. Hearing Xiao Linger's words, Yi Xian was touched. He gently rubbed Xiao Linger's head and smiled. Don't worry, Big Brother will definitely protect himself in the future. Xiao Linger nodded. Okay. Yi Xian smiled and left the prison pagoda. Outside, Yi Xian saw the Southern Sex Martial Master, Mo Xie, and Zhao Mu. Mo Xie was leaning on a rock, looking very weak. Yi Xian walked to Mo Xie. Are you okay? Mo Xie shook his head. I won't die yet. Yi Xian nodded slightly. He then turned to the Southern Sex Martial Master and bowed respectfully. Thank you, Senior. The Southern Sex Martial Master looked at Yi Xian and said in a deep voice, Little guy, promise me one thing. Yi Xian said, Senior, please say it. The Southern Sex Martial Master said, Don't seek revenge yet. Yi Xian was silent. The Southern Sex Martial Master said, Now that we are facing a great enemy, we really can't afford internal strife. Moreover, if you seek revenge on the Star-Lord now, not only will you not win, you will also lose your life for nothing. Saying this, he walked to Yi Xian's side and lightly patted Yi Xian's shoulder. It's not that you can't be frivolous. It's not a bad thing to be young and hot-blooded. However, you have to act according to your capabilities. If you force something that you can't do, you may harm yourself and others. The old man doesn't want you to give up on revenge. He just hopes that you won't do anything during this period of time. After everything is over, if you are still alive, the old man won't stop you from doing whatever you want. How about it? Yi Xian was silent for a moment and nodded. Okay. The Southern Sex Martial Master smiled slightly. As if he thought of something, he asked again, When you were in God Nation, what kind of country was it? Yi Xian thought for a moment and said, Much better than here. The Southern Sex Martial Master said softly, Much better. Yi Xian nodded. The most important thing is that they are united. In God Nation, the God Lord is the most powerful. That God Lord can issue a decree and no one dares to disobey it. Moreover, I don't know the strength of those forces in their country, but they shouldn't be weak. The Southern Sex Martial Master was silent. Yi Xian said again, Senior, you must be careful. The Southern Sex Martial Master nodded. Of course, We won't underestimate them. Yi Xian wanted to say something but hesitated. The Southern Sect's martial master smiled. You want to say that we don't have any chance of winning, right? Yi Xian nodded. The Southern Sect's martial master smiled. Don't worry. We also have a trump card that no one knows about. Yi Xian nodded and didn't say anything else. He wasn't afraid that they would lose. To him, whether they lost or not had nothing to do with him. The Southern Sect's martial master suddenly said, during this period of time, you two stay here temporarily. Remember, don't go out. Some of the rumors outside aren't good for you too. Yi Xian smiled. Is it the Order Alliance that says that I, Yi Xian, have betrayed them and sought refuge with God Nation? The Southern Sect's martial master nodded. Yi Xian smiled and didn't say anything. The Southern Sect's martial master was about to speak, but at this moment, he suddenly turned his head and looked into the distance. In the distant sky, an old man was walking in the air. In the old man's hand, there was a golden God's decree. God Nation's expert. Soon, the old man arrived outside the city gate. He looked down and opened the God's decree, his face expressionless. The heavens have the virtue of cherishing life. I don't want blood to flow like a river. From now on, anyone who is willing to surrender will be my people. Those who don't surrender will die. Countless voices suddenly sounded from below. Get lost. God Nation? What a joke. You want us to surrender? What a joke. God Nation's trash, I would rather die than surrender. God Nation's destruction. God Nation's destruction. Chapter 6:13. No surrender. Above the Great Wall, the old man from God Nation looked down at the countless people below, his face expressionless. At this time, the Star-Lord suddenly appeared not far from the old man. The old man looked at the Star-Lord. Star-Lord, what do you think? The Star-Lord said calmly, What do you think? The old man nodded slightly. Her Majesty said, She can kill, but she can also be merciful. Unfortunately, you gave up her mercy. After saying that, he turned and left. In the air, the Star-Lord looked at the old man in the distance with a calm expression. No one knew what he was thinking. Surrender? How could they surrender? Now, the three desolate worlds were controlled by the Monster Race, the Order Alliance, and the Tang Clan. The main resources of these three desolate worlds were controlled by them. Surrendering meant giving up these benefits. Not only did they have to give up these benefits, but they also had to surrender to others. How could they give up? They would not give up. This time, there was only one battle. Fight at all costs. After a moment, the Star-Lord turned and left. Below, countless people were still clamoring. In the distance, on a mountain, Yi Xian and Mo Xie looked at the clamoring crowd below. Yi Xian said softly, These people are all mouthy emperors. Mo Xie nodded slightly. There will always be some people who think they are very powerful, but when faced with a real problem, they are actually very timid. Yi Xian smiled. You have to understand. After all, they can't do anything other than spitting with their mouths. Mo Xie looked at Yi Xian. Brother Yi, what do you plan to do next? Yi Xian said softly, Keep a low profile, wait and see what happens. Mo Xie nodded. Understood. You must be planning something bad again. Yi Xian. Mo Xie looked at the end of the horizon. God Nation, how strong is it? Yi Xian looked in the direction of God Nation and said softly, I don't know. But, it has nothing to do with us anymore. Let's go and cultivate. Soon the two left. God Nation. Tumu Fort. On this day, 3,000 soldiers were gathered in front of the rear gate of the Tumu Fort. Their leader was Commander Yu. On both sides of Commander Yu, there were 30 black-clothed men wielding sickles. Everyone was looking into the distance. Soon, at the end of the city gate, a golden dragon suddenly appeared. The golden dragon was thousands of feet long and covered the sky. The moment it appeared, a powerful dragon aura suddenly appeared in the world. The golden dragon. The final golden dragon of the entire Chaosverse. On the head of the golden dragon stood a little girl. The little girl wore a tight-fitting white robe, and a sheathed sword hung from her waist. She stood on the golden dragon's head with an indifferent gaze. Behind the little girl stood two white-haired old men. Each of them held a sword in their hands. Nan Gongwan was also beside the little girl, but she was a little far away from her. What was worth mentioning was that there was a young man and a woman standing about 3 meters to the right of the little girl. The young man was handsome and wore a long black robe. His right hand was behind his back, and in his hand was a scroll. Beside the young man was a woman wearing a long, dark green dress with several lotus leaves embroidered on it. In the woman's hand was a long, dark green flute. On the ground below the dragon, a group of cavalrymen slowly walked toward Tumu Fort. There were 1,000 of them, all wearing golden armor and wielding golden spears. They were all Tao validation experts. Beneath them were wind chaser cults that had reached the creation realm. The Imperial Guard. This was the Divine Nation's Divine Lord's personal guard, also known as the Divine Guard. Each of them had been carefully selected and answered only to the Divine Lord of the Divine Nation. The 1,000 cavalrymen all had the same aura, and although there were only 1,000 of them, they had the aura of a magnificent army. And behind the 1,000 cavalrymen, there were 3 armies. The Paladin Order. The Paladin Order had a total of 3,000 people, and they were led by 3 captains. These captains answered only to the Divine Lord of the Divine Nation. And behind these 3,000 people, there was another army. There were 9 armies, and each army had 10,000 people. They were the elites of the elites. Their individual strength might not be as strong as the Paladin Order or the Imperial Guard, but they cultivated military formations. With 10,000 people as one, they could easily slay a Tao realm expert. With 90,000 people as one, they could easily slay a Tendo expert. And all of these armies answered only to the Divine Lord. Soon, the dragon arrived above Tumu Fort. Below, Commander Yu and the others inside the fort all knelt on one knee. On the dragon, the little girl looked down and gently pointed her finger upward. Commander Yu and the others stood up, but they still bowed. The little girl slowly walked down from the dragon, followed by the 2 old men holding swords, followed by the man and woman, and then Nan Gongwan. The little girl entered Tumu Fort. At this time, Commander Yu hurriedly came to the little girl's side. "Your Majesty, everyone in the city has been moved to Nanshan City, 1,000 miles away." The little girl nodded. "Nangong." Nan Gongwan walked to the little girl's side and bowed slightly. "Your Majesty." The little girl looked in the direction of the Great Wall. "Who is the strongest person on the plains?" Nan Gongwan thought for a moment, then said, "The known ones are the Star Master, Tang Yen, the Demon King of the Demon Clan, the Martial Master of the Southern Sect, Perfected Chu, and the Divine Lord Commander Yi Zhantian." The little girl said softly, "What about the unknown ones?" Nan Gongwan said, "The ones we don't know are Zhou Yafu, who suddenly disappeared from the Martial Arts Institute, Mu Nanji, the Tang Clan's patriarch, Jian Nanshan, the Sword Faction sect master from 2,500 years ago, Nan Ming Demon King of the Demon Clan who has a half-demon body, and Zhan Wushuang, who is proficient in both saber and sword." The little girl nodded slightly and continued forward. "What about the younger generation?" Nan Gongwan said, "The younger generation includes the little teacher, who ranks first on the law rank. His background is unknown, but his identity is unknown. There is also the 7th Tang, who ranks second on the law rank. He does not like to fight and left the Tang clan to travel. Other than these 2, there is the disciple of the Southern Sect Martial Master, Zhao Mu, and the disciple of Perfected Chu, Tai Niu." When she spoke up to hear, she paused slightly and continued. "Besides these few people, there are 3 more. They're the martial institutions in Lanxiu who possesses the martial god physique, Lian Wanli, and the Moke clan's Mo Xie." The little girl suddenly said, "What about Yi Xian?" Nan Gongwan was silent. The little girl said, "What is it?" Nan Gongwan said in a low voice, "I don't know how to describe his strength." The little girl said, "Then just say it." Nan Gongwan nodded. "This person is a bit strange. His strength has little to do with his level, so you can't measure his strength by level. His combat strength is also sometimes strong, sometimes weak." The little girl's eyes showed a hint of interest. "Tell me." Nan Gongwan said, "Normally, although his combat strength is strong, it is not heaven-defying. However, when he is angry, his combat strength will increase unreasonably. Moreover, he has a pile of treasures on him. Not only does he have a sword that surpasses the Tao realm, but he also has the soul-suppressing sword from the Nether race. Not only that, But he also has the Divine King's throne and the Divine King's sword. Other than that, he also has a treasure from the fifth dimension. The little girl said softly, "Is it the black tower that appeared in my divine kingdom?" Nan Gongwan nodded. "Yes." The little girl said, "So his background is not simple?" Nan Gongwan said in a low voice, "He is not simple. However, this person is arrogant and does not tolerate any grievances. Thus, his relationship with the forces in the West is not very good. Especially the Order Alliance, they want him dead." The little girl nodded and stopped. At this time, they had arrived at the God Burial Plains. In front of them was the Great Wall. At this moment, the Great Wall was filled with people. They were all cultivators from the barren worlds. When they saw the armies of the Divine Kingdom, everyone fell silent. This was the army of the Divine Kingdom. This was especially true for the 1,000 divine guards at the front. They stood there like an army of thousands of men and horses, giving off a strong sense of oppression. Solemn. At this moment, the expressions of all the experts on the Great Wall became solemn. The Divine Kingdom was much stronger than they had imagined. The Planet Lord and the other four were also extremely solemn. At this moment, they realized that Yi Xian did not lie to them. But fortunately, if the Divine Kingdom was only this strong, they still had a good chance of winning. After all, they were great forces that had existed for thousands of years. How could they not have a trump card? At this time, the Planet Lord appeared in front of the little girl. The Planet Lord glanced at the little girl. Then his eyes fell on the two elders behind the little girl. When he saw the two, although the Planet Lord's expression did not change, his heart was extremely solemn. Unfathomable. This was the feeling that the two elders gave him. The Planet Lord withdrew his gaze and looked at the little girl. "Your Divine Kingdom starting this war will only cause both sides to suffer. You." Meanwhile, the little girl spoke abruptly, "Both of you aren't qualified to cause both sides to suffer." The Planet Lord's expression instantly became unsightly, and he was about to speak when the little girl spoke abruptly, "Let the younger generation play with us for now." As soon as she finished speaking, a young man in white clothes suddenly appeared in front of the little girl. He bowed slightly to the little girl, and then he walked over to the entrance of the Great Wall. He gazed at the experts on the Great Wall. "I'm the Divine Kingdom's junior master of the Boundless Sect, Lin Xiaobai. Please provide me with your guidance. Please provide me with your guidance." A man suddenly leaped off the wall. "I'll play with you." "I." Suddenly, Lin Xiaobai vanished. Bang! The others hadn't even reacted when the man had been transformed into a pile of mush. Everyone's expressions instantly became solemn when they witnessed this scene. The Dao Mastery Realm. The young man before them was actually an expert at the Dao Mastery Realm. Lin Xiaobai looked up at the experts on the Great Wall. "Don't be so weak. Please respect me." "Thank you." Meanwhile, a young man suddenly descended in front of Lin Xiaobai. Someone instantly exclaimed with surprise when they saw this young man. "It's Mo Yunshan, who's ranked 6th on the Dao rankings." The 6th on the Dao rankings. Mo Yunshan gazed at Lin Xiaobai. "Please provide me with your guidance." Lin Xiaobai nodded. "Please be careful." As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly vanished. In an instant, a powerful force swept towards Mo Yunshan like a storm, and the space in its path collapsed inch by inch. Mo Yunshan's expression changed drastically. He didn't dare act carelessly in the slightest, and a spear suddenly tore through the air and stabbed forward. Bang! As soon as the two forces collided, Mo Yunshan was instantly blasted back, and a figure flashed by while he was retreating. In the next moment, bang! Mo Yunshan's figure was blasted flying and smashed against the Great Wall. Bang! Mo Yunshan's body instantly exploded apart while blood sprayed into the surroundings. Lin Xiaobai patted the dust on his chest lightly, and then he gazed at the Great Wall. "Ask the first on the Dao rankings to step forward." All the spectators were speechless. P.S. Even though there were only 2 updates, my love for all of you hasn't lessened at all. I still love all of you regardless of whether you give me monthly passes or not. My love for all of you is extremely pure and true. What about all of you? Do all of you feel the same way towards me? Do all of you still love me no matter how much more I get? Do you still give me monthly passes? I think so. Because love is mutual. Love shouldn't be measured by monthly passes and updates. Do all of you think I'm right? You're tuning in to the Xueqi's Martial Arts Saga YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.